Chapter 3760. Chapter 3755. Chapter 3755 Work Together 1. The Underworld Emperor. The moment Nye Tian confirmed the identity of the demonic edge, his pupils suddenly constricted, and they emitted a fierce and surprised light. He finally saw through Devil Edge's true identity. However, he did not expect the demon edge to be the emperor of the underworld. Even though he was shocked by the result, he was sure that the demonic edge was the emperor of the underworld. In the collision of the swords just now, the energy released by the demonic edge was exactly the same as that of the underworld emperor. However, after losing the heaven-punishing demon heart, the emperor of the netherworld's aura seemed to have changed. It was unknown if he was deliberately hiding it. However, Demon Edge had been forced to use some kind of bloodline power during that final clash, which allowed Nye Tian to see through his identity. Nye Tian, we really are enemies on a narrow road. Why do I always see you wherever I go? At this moment, the Emperor of the Netherworld had already realized that his identity had been exposed, so he simply stopped concealing himself. He let out a low roar, and the demonic chi around his body dispersed to reveal a ghastly and terrifying face. The reason why his face was said to be sinister and terrifying was not because his appearance had changed, but because he was wearing a black ghost mask that exuded a sinister aura. You really are the Emperor of the Underworld. Nye Tian's eyes trembled, and the corners of his mouth pulled up into a cold smile. The last time he met the Underworld Emperor, the latter was preparing to use the great heaven-punishing formation of 9 sacrifices to activate the heaven-punishing demon heart again. However, his plan had been foiled by Nye Tian and Lai Yanjiufeng. In the end, 7 kills died trying to kill the Netherworld Emperor, and Lai Yanjiufeng and Nye Tian worked together to heavily injure the Netherworld Emperor. After that, Lai Yanjiufeng had fused with the heaven-punishing demon heart, while the Emperor of the Underworld had used the heaven-punishing gate to escape. Nye Tian didn't expect that the Emperor of the Netherworld would come to the 5 Underworld Sacred World after his escape and meet him unexpectedly. Nye Tian, I know why you came to the 5 Underworld Holy World. It's for the 5 calamities in the sky, right? The Emperor of the Underworld gazed at Nye Tian from afar. His aura calmed down and he looked very calm. However, his pair of gloomy eyes still contained an unconcealable murderous intent. He was the Emperor of the Underworld, the heaven-punishing Devil Lord, but he had been reduced to a martial slave because of Nye Tian. Nye Tian had to bear most of the responsibility for him to get to this point. How could he not resent Nye Tian? You also know about the 5 tribulations of the sky? Nye Tian was stunned for a moment, his face full of doubt. He didn't expect the Underworld Emperor to know about the 5 tribulations in the sky. This Emperor knows much more than you do, the Underworld Emperor said with a cold smile. Nye Tian, you and I have never been friends, but now I want to cooperate with you. Cooperation? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he became interested. He smiled faintly and said, Tell me about it. Let's work together to take the 5 tribulations of the sky. After we get it, we will split it in half. What do you think? The Emperor of the Underworld said in a deep voice. Split it in half? Nye Tian's eyes flickered and he couldn't help but ponder. He had never thought of sharing the 5 tribulations of the sky with anyone. In fact, until now, he still didn't know what kind of power the 5 tribulations of the sky was. However, judging from the Emperor of the Underworld's reaction, the boundless calamity sword will he had integrated earlier was obviously not the 5 tribulations of the sky. With the Emperor of the Underworld's perception, it was impossible that he didn't notice the boundless calamity sword will. At this time, the people outside the beast martial field looked at Nye Tian and the Emperor of the Underworld with strange expressions. They didn't expect that Nye Tian and the Emperor of the Underworld knew each other. Wu Jiu was also stunned and didn't react for a long time. The current situation seemed to be out of his control. In the beast martial field, Nie Tian thought for a long time. His lips twitched and he laughed coldly. What if I don't agree? You have no choice but to agree. The Emperor of the Underworld smiled coldly, and his voice was low and threatening. Is that so? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and he had a bad premonition. Could it be that the Emperor of the Underworld had obtained some kind of bargaining chip? Humph! The Emperor of the Underworld laughed, and then his figure moved, leaving the beast martial field. Seeing this, Nie Tian immediately chased after him, and the two landed beside Wu Jiu almost at the same time. What do you want? Do you want to die? The sudden actions of the two alarmed the guards of the beast fighting ground. After a low roar, dozens of black-clothed cultivators appeared in the surrounding space and surrounded the two. Make them scram, the Emperor of the Underworld said coldly as he stared at Wu Jiu with a murderous look. You want to die? Before he finished speaking, one of the guards couldn't bear it anymore. He roared and attacked directly. But the next moment a strange scene happened. Bang! Before the guard got close to the Emperor of the Underworld, his body trembled strangely in the air, and then directly exploded, turning into a mass of bloody light. The bloody scene stunned everyone, and they all sucked in a breath of cold air. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. Then, something even stranger happened. A figure appeared in the bloodlight. He stood there coldly like a sharp, murderous sword. It was as if the space around him would be torn apart by him if he moved even the slightest bit. Seeing this scene, everyone's expression changed, and they were so shocked that they couldn't speak for a long time. Nie Tian also frowned, and his heart was filled with shock. At the moment when the martial artist's body exploded, he felt a wave of space-time aura, which seemed to be a space-time door. The supreme killing swordsman in front of him had appeared from the space-time door. Lord Demon Sword. At this time, Wu Jiu's eyes trembled, and he finally reacted, and he shouted in a trembling voice. He had never thought that it would be Lord Demon Sword, the Lord of Demon Wind City, who had come in person. The swordsman in front of him was the Lord of Demon Wind City, the Demon Sword. The martial artists of Demon Wind City all had sword marks left by the demon sword on their bodies. The swordsman just now had been forcibly torn apart by the sword marks, and the demon edge had used the power of the sword marks to directly descend. Wu Jiu was a little dumbfounded. He did not expect the demon sword to come in person. The demon sword's eyes were cold, and they swept across Wu Jiu coldly. Then, he took a step forward and came in front of the Emperor of the Underworld. Then, he made a shocking move. He knelt down on both knees and said respectfully to the Emperor of the Underworld, "Your subordinate, the Demon Sword, pays his respects to the Emperor of the Underworld." The Demon Sword's actions caused everyone present to be stunned. Their expressions were dull and lifeless, and they were in complete disbelief. The dignified Demon Sword, the Lord of Demon Wind City, one of the top powerhouses of the 5 underworld holy domains, actually knelt in front of a martial slave of the beast fighting Colosseum. What was going on? "Get up," the Emperor of the Underworld said indifferently, and there was no trace of emotion on his face. Wu Jiu, who was to the side, was completely dumbfounded. Chapter 3761. Chapter 3756. Chapter 3756. Absolute Master and Servant Nie Tian was also stunned by the scene in front of him, and it took him a long time to react. It seemed that the identity of the Underworld Emperor as the demonic edge was just a disguise, or even a joke. Subsequently, the demonic sword led the Emperor of the Underworld, Nie Tian, and the others to a grand hall in the fighting Colosseum. "Emperor of the Underworld, did you bring me here to kill me?" Nie Tian looked around and said with a faint smile. "Nie Tian, if this emperor wanted to kill you, do you think you would be able to walk out of the beast martial field?" The Emperor of the Underworld smiled as well, his gaze sweeping over the demonic sword. He wanted to remind Nie Tian that even if he did not have the ability to kill Nie Tian, he definitely had the demon sword. You want to make me join forces with you by threatening me? Nie Tian laughed. How could he not hear the threat in the Emperor of the Underworld's words? Nie Tian, I know very well what kind of person you are. The corners of the Underworld Emperor's mouth twitched and he sneered gloomily. If it's something you don't want to do, I'm afraid you won't do it even if the saber is placed on your neck. Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't say anything. He wanted to see what the Emperor of the Underworld was up to. However, even if you don't care about your own life and death, what about the lives of others? Do you think you don't care about the lives of others? The Underworld Emperor laughed again. His deep and hoarse voice had a strong threatening intent. Nie Tian frowned and his expression changed. He vaguely had an ominous feeling in his heart. Demon sword. The Underworld Emperor laughed again and nodded at the demon sword. Yes, the demon sword replied. Next, it moved its palm to unleash a wave of power. Clearly, this was some sort of signal. A moment later, 2 black-clothed martial artists appeared, escorting a green-clothed woman. That azure-clothed woman looked very young. Her facial features were exquisite, and she could be considered a rare beauty. However, her eyes were very resolute, and they gave off a heroic feeling. Behind Nie Tian, Tong Dakian's eyes flickered when he saw the girl in green, and he exclaimed, "Little sister." The woman was none other than his sister, Tong Qingling. When Nie Tian saw Tong Qingling, he couldn't help but narrow his eyes and put on a strange expression. How could the Underworld Emperor use Tong Qingling to threaten Jingjiu? Second brother. Tong Qingling also saw Tong Dakian. Her resolute eyes slightly trembled as she called out in a deep voice. However, she didn't show much reaction. "You bastards, I'll kill you!" Tong Dakian was instantly enraged. He let out a wild roar as Do Chi surged out of his body. It was like a monstrous wave that was incomparably turbulent. Impudent! At this moment, Wu Jiu's expression darkened. With a loud shout, his hands formed a strange seal. Several runes appeared and revolved in the air like ropes, directly suppressing Tong Dakian's Do Chi and restricting his movements. Such a strange technique! Nie Tian's eyes darkened upon seeing this, and his heart was filled with astonishment. He did not expect this short old man with the name Wu Jiu to possess such a shocking strength. Furthermore, the old man's technique was extremely strange. The sealing force of the runes was extremely terrifying. Not to mention Tong Dakian, even Nie Tian would have a hard time breaking free from the sealing force of the runes. Tong Dakian did not yield despite being sealed by the runes. Instead, he struggled to break free like a wild beast. His body was torn open by the runes, and he was instantly covered in blood. "Behave yourself!" Wu Jiu could not help but become enraged. He uttered a roar and unleashed more runes to restrict Tong Dakian's movements. "Second brother!" Tong Qingling screamed in astonishment upon seeing this. She tried to step forward, but she was restrained by the 2 black-shirt cultivators behind her. "Son of AB*TCH. Tong Dakian still refused to give up. He let out a wild roar and actually wanted to break free. His entire body became abnormally violent under the restriction of the runes. It was as if his body would explode in the next moment. "Wu Jiu, kill this brat!" The demonic sword seemed to be unable to stand it any longer and ordered coldly. Anyway, they already had Nie Tian, so they did not need Tong Dakian anymore. Killing him was not a big deal. "Yes," Wu Jiu answered. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his killing intent was heavy. Even if Tong Dakian and Tong Qingling were from the Tong family, he did not care. "Don't kill him!" At this critical moment, Nie Tian took a step forward and bellowed in a deep voice. "Brat, get out of my way!" Wu Jiu sneered. He stretched out his palm and pressed down on Nie Tian. Boom! In an instant, a terrifying pressure assaulted him, and Nie Tian instantly felt a fatal killing intent. Wu Jiu's strength was actually stronger than he had expected. "Stop!" At this critical moment, the Emperor of the Underworld's deep voice rang out. Wu Jio's palm paused in the air, and the killing intent disappeared. Even his master, the demonic sword, had to kneel before the Emperor of the Underworld. How would he dare to disobey the Emperor's order? Demonic sword, did I allow you to speak? At this moment, the Emperor of the Underworld stood up and looked at the demonic sword coldly with a murderous look in his eyes. Your Majesty, The demonic sword was startled. He was so frightened that his face turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He did not have the demeanor of a powerhouse at all. This will not happen again. The Emperor of the Underworld's expression was gloomy. After a few seconds of silence, he said word by word eerily, Yes. The demonic sword nodded immediately, and his tense expression relaxed a little. The Emperor of the Underworld's expression was cold. Even through the mask, one could feel the coldness from his entire body. If it were not for the fact that the demonic sword was still useful, he would definitely kill this person. Wu Jio, who was watching from the side, was frightened and dumbfounded. He had originally thought that the Emperor of the Underworld was someone from a powerful force, which was why the demonic sword was so afraid of him. But now, it seemed that the demonic sword was not simply afraid of the Emperor of the Underworld. It was a fatal fear. The relationship between the Emperor of the Underworld and the demonic sword was the absolute master-servant relationship. Ah! At this moment, Tong Dakian roared again. He still had not given up. Brother Tong, calm down and trust me. Nie Tian walked up to Tong Dakian and said in a deep voice. Tong Dakian's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Nie Tian. Feeling the determination in the latter's eyes, he actually slowly calmed down. Nie Tian nodded slightly and turned to look at the Emperor of the Underworld. He said with a faint smile, Your Majesty, are you going to use the lives of the Tong siblings to threaten me? The Emperor of the Underworld looked at Nie Tian and seemed to have noticed something. The corners of his mouth twitched as he said, Nie Tian, you think that the lives of the Tong siblings are not enough for you to hand over half of the 5 tribulations in the sky, right? Yes. Nie Tian's eyes flickered as he nodded without any pretense. He would save the Tong siblings, but as the Emperor of the Underworld had said, the lives of the Tong siblings were not enough for him to hand over half of the 5 tribulations in the sky. Tong Dakian and Tong Qingling were taken aback at the same time. The way they looked at Nie Tian became a little strange. They did not expect Nie Tian to say this. Humph! The Emperor of the Underworld was not surprised. He laughed and stretched out his hand. A divine sense image appeared in front of him, and a figure as pure as ice and clean as jade appeared on it. Chapter 3762. The Gathering of the Winds and Clouds, Share. Nie Tian was shocked. His lips trembled as he yelled out a name. How could he not tell that the figure in the divine sense image was none other than Cher? Cher seemed to be in a panic in the image. She was running around frantically as if she was looking for something. Nie Tian stared at Cher's figure, trying to get a closer look at her. However, the Underworld Emperor flipped his palm and the divine sense image ended. You! Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he stared at the Underworld Emperor with murderous intent. Nie Tian, if Cher's life is included, is it worth it for you to give up half of the 5 tribulations in the sky? The Underworld Emperor said with a calm smile. He looked very relaxed. Underworld Emperor, if you dare hurt Cher, I will kill you. Nie Tian's eyes were bloodshot and filled with murderous intent as he spoke in a cold tone. Don't worry, your Cher is only trapped in an illusionary realm. If you are willing to cooperate, I can guarantee that she will be fine. The Underworld Emperor smiled calmly. His eyes were filled with a gloomy coldness. Why should I believe you? Nie Tian asked in a cold tone as he panted heavily. In the current situation, do you have any other choice but to trust this emperor? The Underworld Emperor sneered and countered with a question, appearing quite arrogant. His trump card was none other than Schwer. That was why he was so confident that he could defeat Nietian. He had not expected Sher to come to the 5 underworld sacred world. Although he no longer had the heavenly punishing demon heart, he still had an extraordinary connection with Sher. He had sensed Sher's arrival when he had first arrived at the 5 underworld sacred world. He had immediately sent his demonic sword to capture Sher. When he saw Nietian appear, he suddenly realized that Sher was only accompanying Nietian to the 5 underworld sacred world. As for Nietian, of course, he knew that Nietian was definitely here for the 5 tribulations in the sky. However, he was very sure that Nietian didn't know what kind of power the 5 tribulations in the sky was. Nietian's face was gloomy and murderous, and he was actually speechless. The Underworld Emperor was so cruel that he had grasped Jingjiu's weakness. Before he could ascertain Sher's condition, he had no choice but to trust the Underworld Emperor. Moreover, he had no choice but to cooperate with the Underworld Emperor. He couldn't risk Sher's life. Nietian, you are a smart man. I hope you won't do anything stupid, the Emperor of the Underworld said with a sinister smile as he looked at Nietian. I'll cooperate with you. Nietian became cold and said solemnly. Very good. The corners of the Underworld Emperor's mouth twitched a bit, and he said with a faint smile, This is what a smart person should be like. Tell me, how do we cooperate? Nietian asked in a cold tone, ignoring the Emperor of the Underworld. Don't be hasty. The 5 Tribulations mountain range hasn't reacted yet, but it won't be long. I can already feel the power of the 5 Tribulations stirring, the Emperor of the Underworld said with a cold smile. The power of the 5 Tribulations? Nietian's gaze froze, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Nietian, do you think the 5 Tribulations in the sky is only a power that belongs to the heart of the sky? The Emperor of the Underworld smiled faintly, and his eyes were somewhat mysterious. He said, When we arrive at the 5 Tribulations mountain range and meet some people, you will naturally understand. If we are lucky, we may even meet that traitor. Traitor? Nietian sensed the viciousness in the Emperor of the Underworld's eyes, and suddenly realized that the traitor the Emperor of the Underworld was referring to was Lian Jiufeng. Nietian, rest for now. We will head to the 5 Tribulations mountain range in 3 days. The Emperor of the Underworld calmed down, and said indifferently to Nietian. Afterwards, Nietian and the Tong siblings left together. Under Wu Jiu's arrangements, they temporarily stayed in the beast battling arena. Due to Nietian's previous attitude, the Tong siblings' attitude towards him was rather cold, but he did not mind. Right now, what he cared about the most was Sher's safety. No matter what, he would never let anything happen to Sher. 3 days later, Nietian and the Tong siblings arrived at the Great Hall. The Emperor of the Underworld and the others were already waiting for him there. Nietian, let's go, the Emperor of the Underworld said directly, and left with Nietian and the others. Other than the Emperor of the Underworld and Nietian, there were also the Tong siblings and a super bodyguard, the Demon's Sword. The Emperor of the Underworld brought the Demon's Sword with him to protect him. Nietian reckoned that the forces of the Demon Wind City should be similar to the demonic moon Heavenly Wolf tribe in the 7th Sacred Cultivator's world. They were all forces arranged by the Emperor of the Underworld in advance. As for why the Emperor of the Underworld became a martial slave, according to him, it was to absorb some special blood chi and bloodline power to recover his strength. It was likely that those who were killed by the Emperor of the Underworld in the beast battling arena were bloodline martial artists that the Emperor of the Underworld needed. Along the way, Nietian occasionally sensed the aura of the Demon's Sword, but he was unable to determine how strong the latter's true cultivation was. About a day later, Nietian and the others arrived outside a boundless mountain range. The shape of the mountain range in front of them was very unique. From afar, it looked like a huge hand covering the earth, or like a headless beast. Its body was submerged in the earth, revealing 5 huge spines. Nietian, this is the 5 Tribulations mountain range. do you feel anything? The Emperor of the Underworld smiled faintly. His eyes were filled with a cold glint, and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard the Emperor of the Underworld's reminder. In the next moment, his pupils shrank, as if he had discovered something special. His expression changed. He suddenly felt that the entire Five Tribulations mountain range was releasing a mysterious and dark force. This force was hidden in the void and was extremely difficult to detect. However, when Nie Tian truly sensed it, he discovered that this force had some kind of resonance with the soul of the sky in his body. The more he tried to sense it, the stronger this resonance became. The Five Tribulations of the sky are in the Five Tribulations mountain range. After a moment, Nie Tian calmed down and looked at the endless mountain range in front of him with a fiery expression. The Emperor of the Underworld smiled faintly and nodded. The Five Tribulations of the sky that you speak of, more accurately, is the power of the Five Tribulations. The power of the Five Tribulations. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed, and his expression froze slightly. In the next moment, he seemed to have suddenly sensed something. His expression changed, and an extremely cold, murderous intent gushed out from his eyes. The Emperor of the Underworld was startled when he sensed the change in Nie Tian's aura. Nie Tian, you're still alive. At this moment, a deep, murderous voice was heard. Then, a dark force appeared and enveloped the surrounding void, causing the entire area to darken. Chapter 3763. The enemy who killed his father Darkness Nie Tian, Devil's Knight. Nie Tian's pupils abruptly contracted when he saw the dark figure in the sky. His face was filled with cold, killing intent. He had never imagined that he would run into Devil's Knight here. He had thought that he would run into Lai Yinjiufeng, but Devil's Knight had shown up first. Nie Tian, it's a miracle that you've survived until now. Devil's Knight's expression was dark. His eyes were filled with a cold aura, and dark runes swirled around the corners of his eyes, making him look even darker and more sinister. At the same time, his appearance was slightly different from Nie Tian's. Even so, the Onyx Emperor, Demon Sword, and the others could still tell that Devil's Knight had the same appearance as Nie Tian. The Demon Sword and the Tong siblings were shocked. They hadn't expected someone who looked exactly like Nie Tian to show up. On the other hand, the Onyx Emperor was very calm, as if he had already seen through something. He could sense an aura similar to Nie Tian's from Devil's Knight. However, Devil's Knight's aura was even darker than Nie Tian's. It was filled with a murderous aura. It's all thanks to you that I'm still alive, Nie Tian responded coldly. His eyes were filled with killing intent. Back when he was in the Bloodsoul sect, he was severely injured by Patriarch Bloodsoul. It could be said that he had saved Mo Yi. However, after Mo Yi retaliated against Patriarch Bloodsoul, he turned around and tried to kill him. Fortunately, at the critical moment, Rainy Qianye and Snow came out of their seclusion and saved his life. As for Mo Yi, in the name of saving him, he had left a hidden force in his body, which was a real trick. Because of this, the pressure from the divine demon inverse mark in his body became so strong that he almost couldn't bear it. In order to resist the oppression of the Godfiend inverse inscription, Nie Tian followed the guidance of the Five Calamities portrait in the sky and arrived at the Five Underworld Sacred World. To his surprise, Devil's Knight had also come to the Five Underworld Holy World. Could it be that he's also here for the Five Tribulations in the sky? The next moment, Nie Tian suddenly thought of something. His eyes trembled and his expression changed. Apart from the Star Essence Stone, Devil's Knight had inherited almost all of his powers, including the Heart of the Sky and even the 9 Extreme Chaos Beast. If not for the 9th level Chaos Beast, Devil's Knight would not have been able to devour Patriarch Bloodsoul. The current Devil's Knight was already an extremely monstrous existence. Not only did he possess the Heart of the Dark Sky, but he also possessed the Blood Soul Ancestors' 3 souls profound heart. He might be the only person in the world of martial arts who had merged two hearts of the sky and earth at the same time. Although, to be more precise, Devil's Knight's heart of the dark sky was not the true heart of the sky. He did indeed possess the power of two hearts. The heart of the dark sky in his body might even be stronger than the true heart of the sky in Nietian's body. Humph! Devil's Knight smiled cold. He stared at Nietian with a pair of murderous eyes and said, "Nietian, no matter what, I did save you. Also, if no one else had intervened in the battle that day, you would have been dead, wouldn't you?" Nietian's face was gloomy and he did not speak. In the final battle on the Blood Soul Road, no matter how he tried to explain, he had indeed lost. To be more precise, Nietian had lost to the Blood Soul Ancestor and Devil's Knight. Since Nietian's rebirth, he had experienced countless fierce battles, but in the end, Devil's Knight was the first person to be able to injure him to the point where his body and soul were not destroyed. In the past, he had fought countless people who were stronger than him, and the final results were acceptable to him. However, the most miserable defeat in his life was actually at the hands of himself. Now that he thought about it, it was a little ridiculous. "Nietian, I knew that I would definitely meet you here, so I specially brought someone to see you as a surprise." At this moment, Devil's Knight smiled cold and his eyes became extremely playful. Nietian's eyes narrowed. Devil's Knight's expression at this moment gave him an ominous feeling. "Lan Zhuing, come out." Devil's Knight smiled sinisterly and spoke softly. Then two silhouettes appeared. One of them was Lan Zhuing. "Lan Zhuing." Nietian's expression changed when he saw Lan Zhuing again. He could sense a strange aura from the latter. "Nietian, it's you." Lan Zhuing's beautiful eyes abruptly constricted when she saw Nietian, and they actually flickered with icy cold killing intent. Her originally delicate and beautiful face instantly became ferocious and terrifying, and she seemed as if she wanted to eat someone, as if Nietian was her greatest enemy. "Lan Zhuing, what's wrong?" Nietian frowned, the temptation and surprise in his eyes intensified. He never thought that when he saw Lan Zhuing again, she would look like this. Previously, when Nietian and the others left the path of the Blood Soul, in order to get rid of the imprint of bliss in Lan Zhuing's body, she temporarily stayed by Devil's Knight's side. Devil's Knight promised that once he got rid of the imprint of bliss in Lan Zhuing's body, he would let her go. But now it was obvious that this was not the case. Devil's Knight must have done something to Lan Zhuing. "The hatred of my father's death is irreconcilable. Nietian, I want your life." Lan Zhuing's eyes flickered as she growled. Her entire body's chi surged and in a flash, the jade ocean mirroring moon slashed across the sky, aiming for Nietian's head. This sudden turn of events caused Nietian's expression to change as he exclaimed in shock. When did he become Lan Zhuing's enemy, who killed her father? In the next second, Nietian stepped out and his entire body's chi soared. Like a giant dragon, he blocked Lan Zhuing's sword. Bang! In the air, a muffled sound echoed. Lan Zhuing was hit by the sword's chi and was flung backwards. She only managed to stabilize herself after retreating for a few thousand meters. However, it was obvious that Nietian didn't unleash his full strength. Of course, he wouldn't hurt Lan Zhuing. "Damn it!" Lan Zhuing steadied herself and shouted. The sword's chi around her became even more violent and she wanted to continue attacking. Her eyes were bloodshot and filled with killing intent, and she seemed abnormally violent. "Stop!" Just then, Devil's Knight's voice rang out. It was very calm, but there was an undefiable sense of dominance in his voice. Lan Zhuing's eyes trembled. She didn't want to accept this, but she didn't dare to disobey Devil's Knight. She dispersed her chi and bowed to Devil's Knight. "Yes, master." "Master?" Upon hearing this, Nietian's eyes grew grim as he spun around and fixed Emoyi with a piercing stare. "What the hell did you do to her, Emoyi?" he asked, each word laced with killing intent. Ever since Lan Zhuing appeared, Everything about her had been strange. First, she said that Nye Tian killed her father. Then, she called Devil's Night Master. Something was definitely wrong. Chapter 3764. Chapter 3759. Chapter 3759 Blazing 9 Blades, Memory. Nye Tian's pupils suddenly shrunk as he stared at Devil's Night with eyes as cold as ice and said, "You modified her memory. Can't I?" Devil's Night raised his brows and said with a cold smile, "I only promised you that I'll help her remove the brand. But I didn't promise that I wouldn't do anything else to her. Even if I let her go now, she won't leave. You can't blame me, right? You despicable." Nye Tian clenched his fists. He wanted nothing more than to pounce on Devil's Night and kill him. But he couldn't, not only because Lan Zhuiying was still in Devil's Knight's hands, but also because there was another figure standing behind Devil's Night, the Blood Soul Sect's Punishment Hall Master, Sima Xiu. It was obvious that Devil's Night, who had fused with the Blood Soul Heart, had already taken control of the entire Blood Soul Sect. After Nye Tian left, Devil's Night recovered from his injuries and completely fused with the Three-Soul Profound Heart. After that, he left the Blood Soul path. With the help of Devil's Night's power, he wiped out the unstable forces in the Blood Soul Sect. All the restless people, including Deputy Sect Master Dongfang Jiuling, were all killed by Devil's Night. Devil's Night had replaced the Blood Soul Ancestor and become the true controller of the Blood Soul Sect. As for Sima Xiu, he was already his most loyal supporter. Therefore, on this trip to the 5 Underworld Sacred World, Devil's Night only brought one bodyguard, Sima Xiu. When he was in the Blood Soul Sect, Nye Tian had already witnessed Sima Xiu's strength. Sima Xiu's strength was not any weaker than an expert like the Black Emperor. He just didn't know who was stronger, Sima Xiu or the Demon Sword. "Nye Tian, do you know what the biggest difference between us is?" Devil's Night looked at Nye Tian and said with a faint smile, "You have your principles when you do things. I do things by fair means or foul." "Really?" Nye Tianling laughed. This was the first time he had seen someone so shameless and righteous. "Humph." Devil's Night sneered, "I know you disdain my methods, but it's precisely because I'm unscrupulous that I'm stronger than you. In our fated battle, you will definitely die by my hands." "I'll wait and see," Nye Tian said gloomily, the killing intent in his eyes almost out of control. He had never imagined that Devil's Night would be so despicable as to directly modify Lan Zhuiying's memory. Devil's Night had fused with the Three-Soul Profound Heart. This was the heart of heaven and earth that contained enormous spiritual power. Therefore, it was not surprising that Devil's Night had the ability to modify memories. At this time, Lan Zhuiying had completely become Devil's Night's puppet, a complete slave. Therefore, things had become very troublesome. The Demon Sword, who was standing to the side, had a dark look in his eyes. He wanted to make a move, but before the Emperor of the Underworld spoke, he didn't dare to act recklessly. "Humph." Just then, Devil's Night coldly snickered. His gaze locked onto the Emperor of the Underworld and he snickered. "The Emperor of the Underworld who escaped from the Door of Judgment has come all the way here. What a surprise! You little bastard, watch your attitude when talking to the Emperor of the Underworld." Before the Emperor of the Underworld could speak, the Demon Sword stepped forward and spoke coldly. His entire body was pulsing with sword energy and his chi was extremely sharp, as if he could tear apart the sky in the next second. At the same time, Sima Xiu stepped forward. His chi exploded and the space around him sank. As long as he was here, he would not allow anyone to hurt Devil's Night. Demon Sword stepped down. The Emperor of the Underworld, however, had a relaxed expression on his face. He waved his hand, signaling for the Demon Sword to step down. He then looked at Devil's Night with a pair of dark eyes and laughed. "Your name is Devil's Night, right? It seems like you don't like your original identity. If I'm not mistaken, you're just a vassal of Nye Tian's, right?" Hearing the Emperor of the Underworld's words, Devil's Knight's face darkened to the extreme. His eyes were shaking and his killer's intent was sharp. What he hated the most was being called a subordinate of Nietian. Even though he was indeed a subordinate of Nietian, his capabilities as a subordinate were no longer below Nietian's. Plus, he had merged with the heart of three souls and had completely broken away from Nietian. He had become a completely different person. If he wanted to kill Nietian, he would have to completely erase his past. However, the Emperor of the Underworld was rubbing salt on his wounds. How could he not be angry? If you say that he is a subordinate of Nietian, then what are you, the Emperor of the Underworld? A deep voice rang out in the sky at this moment. A black-robed figure then appeared and said coldly, "A stray dog?" Nietian's expression changed when he heard this voice. He abruptly turned around and saw an extremely familiar face. Blazing Jiufeng. The Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out at this moment. He called out the person's name word by word, each word filled with killing intent and suppressed fury. Blazing Jiufeng, the person who had almost killed the Emperor of the Underworld and taken away his heaven-punishing demon heart, had appeared. How could the Emperor of the Underworld not be excited? "My Emperor of the Underworld, I didn't think you would be here as well. What a surprise!" Lien Jiufeng stood coldly in the sky like a ball of fire. He smirked coldly and said, "You no longer have the heaven-punishing demon heart. Do you still want the power of the 5 tribulations? You deserve to die." The Emperor of the Underworld was immediately enraged by Blazing Jiufeng's jab. He roared and took a step forward, slamming his palm down. The hand of the Emperor of the Underworld appeared. Its aura blanketed the surroundings as it surged towards Blazing Jiufeng. Humph! However, Blazing Jiufeng only sneered in the face of the enormous hand's pressure. His eyes were filled with undisguised disdain. He also slammed his palm forward, and the power of golden flames surged out. A huge palm of flames appeared, surging with demonic aura. It was incomparably violent, as if it wanted to burn the entire world. Boom! The two palms collided in the next moment, causing space to tremble. Then, both palms collapsed at the same time, turning into surging waves that rampaged through the sky. Bang! The Emperor of the Underworld was sent flying by the shockwave, leaving a trail of blood in the air. However, Blazing Jiufeng had not moved at all. He was as steady as a mountain. It was obvious that his current strength had far surpassed the Emperor of the Underworld. Nietian's eyes narrowed when he saw this. He was shocked. Even though the Emperor of the Underworld had lost the heaven-punishing demon heart, he was still at the 3rd level of the heavenly mandate realm through some unknown method. Moreover, Nietian had not gained the upper hand when he fought the Emperor of the Underworld in the Beast Martial Field that day. Therefore, the Emperor of the Underworld was no weaker than Nietian. However, the Emperor of the Underworld was completely suppressed by Blazing Jiufeng's palm strike. This was just too unbelievable. Nietian extended his consciousness and discovered that Blazing Jiufeng was at the 5th level of the Heavenly Mandate Realm. Chapter 3765. To Darkness, are you alright, Emperor of the Netherworld? Demon Sword's expression changed when he saw that the Netherworld Emperor was injured. He moved to catch the Netherworld Emperor. "I'm fine." The Netherworld Emperor's body was covered in bloody wounds, but they were all superficial wounds. His injuries weren't serious, but he looked very wretched. "You're the traitor, Lien Jiufeng. Die." Demon Sword's eyes darkened, and he roared like a wild beast. Sword intent erupted from his body, and he looked like a giant sword. Boom! But at this moment, a dark power appeared in the void. It rolled over like dark clouds and forcefully suppressed the Demon Sword. Damn it! Demon Sword's expression changed at the sudden change. He roared and exploded his sword intent again in an attempt to break free. But strangely, the more he tried to break free, the stronger the dark energy above his head became. A moment later, bean-sized beads of sweat appeared on Demon Sword's forehead. His face was flushed red, and he was almost out of breath. If the power of darkness continued to grow, it would forcefully oppress him to death. With the strength of the Demon Sword, if it was oppressed to death by someone, one could imagine how powerful the person who did it must be. The Emperor of the Netherworld looked at Demon Sword with trembling eyes. He hadn't expected Lai Yin Jiufeng to have such a terrifying expert by his side. "Ghostface, don't kill him yet," Lai Yin Jiufeng suddenly said. His calm voice was filled with undisguised arrogance. As soon as he finished speaking, the dark energy in the void disappeared. The Demon Sword suddenly felt the pressure on it disappear. It took a few deep breaths before it recovered. His eyes trembled as he stared at Lai Yin Jiufeng. He was clearly very angry, but more than that, he was afraid. He didn't dare to attack Lai Yin Jiufeng carelessly anymore. The power of the 5 tribulations hasn't appeared yet. It's too early to kill now. Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled faintly and stared at the Netherworld Emperor. He smiled coldly and said, "Lord Netherworld Emperor, if I'm not mistaken, you have something that belongs to the heaven-punishing demon heart inside you, don't you? Lai Yin Jiufeng, you won't be able to obtain the complete heaven-punishing demon heart even if you kill me now." The Underworld Emperor sneered in response. He was not afraid at all. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown when he heard their words. It would appear that the heaven-punishing demon heart Lai Yin Jiufeng had obtained back then was not the complete demon heart. A part of the heaven-punishing demon heart was still inside the Emperor of the Underworld's body. No wonder the Emperor of the Underworld also wanted the power of the 5 tribulations. "There are still many things I don't know about the heaven-punishing demon heart. How could I bear to kill you?" Lai Yin Jiufeng chuckled. His eyes were eerie as he said, "Also, my target this time isn't you. It's the power of the 5 tribulations. The power of the 5 calamities." Nie Tian's eyes trembled when he heard those words. He was shocked. So Lai Yin Jiufeng had come for the power of the 5 calamities as well. The Emperor of the Underworld, Nie Tian, Devil's Knight, and Lai Yin Jiufeng were 4 people in total. They had all come for the power of the 5 calamities. The one thing these 4 people had in common was that they all possessed the power of the heart of the world to some extent. Is the power of the 5 calamities a kind of power that can merge with the heart of the world? Nie Tian's eyes focused as he guessed. Or perhaps the power of the 5 calamities can greatly increase the power of the heart of the world. He vaguely understood what the Emperor of the Underworld had said before. The power of the 5 calamities was not as simple as he had imagined it to be. That being said, the pressure of competition was extremely great. Setting aside the competition between Nie Tian and the Emperor of the Underworld, just Devil's Knight and Lai Yin Jiufeng alone were very troublesome to deal with. Both of them were very difficult to deal with, and now that they had appeared at the same time, they were even more difficult to deal with. "Nie Tian, I'm a little surprised to see you here as well." At this time, Lai Yin Jiufeng looked at Nie Tian and smiled coldly. "Last time, you and I worked together to defeat the Emperor of the Underworld. But this time, your partner seems to have become the Emperor of the Underworld. In my eyes, you are not such a fickle person. Could it be that His Majesty the Underworld Emperor has found your weakness?" Nie Tian's expression changed when he heard Lai Yin Jiufeng's words. This guy's mind was truly terrifying. Let me guess." Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled darkly when he saw Nie Tian's reaction. Suddenly, his eyes flashed with a strange light. He said, "Oh, I know. The Emperor of the Underworld must have captured someone very important to you. It can't be Cher, can it?" "Lai Yin Jiufeng, that's enough." Nie Tian's eyes darkened as he growled coldly, "Me working together with the Emperor of the Underworld is my business. You have no right to interfere." "Is that so?" Lai Yin Jiufeng smiled again and said, "Nie Tian, you are a smart person, but unfortunately, you chose the wrong person to work with this time. If you work with the Emperor of the Underworld, You will die a horrible death, just like him. Nietion's expression was cold, and he did not say anything. If he was not forced by the situation, he would not work with anyone in front of him. Lian Jiufeng, how about we work together? At this time, Devil's Knight, who had been silent all this time, suddenly looked at Lian Jiufeng and smiled faintly. He wanted to work together. Oh, Nietion of Darkness, you are a good partner to work with. Lian Jiufeng laughed darkly. You agree? Devil's Knight did not get angry. He curled his lips and asked. I agree. Lian Jiufeng smiled faintly and said directly, Nietion is yours, and the Emperor of the Underworld is mine. Very well. Devil's Knight smiled faintly. Lian Jiufeng's words were exactly what he wanted. He only wanted to deal with Nietion. The reason he wanted to work with Lian Jiufeng was because he did not want the Emperor of the Underworld to interfere. This is troublesome. Nietion's eyes darkened slightly when he saw this. He had a bad feeling about this. Lian Jiufeng and Devil's Knight were both troublesome people. If they worked together, it would be even more troublesome. It seemed that the battle for the power of the 5 disasters would be far more intense than Nietion imagined. Let's go. Nietion smiled faintly and prepared to leave. Long time no see, Nietion. However, at this moment, a deep murderous voice suddenly rang out in the sky. Then, a golden light appeared and fell down like a meteor, steadily landing in the distant sky. Nietion heard this voice and turned to see a dazzling golden Buddhist light. His expression changed, and his lips twitched. He shouted the person's name, the Bodhi seed. A figure slowly walked out of the Buddhist light. It was the Bodhi seed. The first time Nietion heard of the heart of the world was from the Bodhi seed. Chapter 3766. Chapter 3761. Chapter 3761 Rakshasa Vajra. The last time Nietion saw the Bodhi seed was back in the 7th cultivator of true virtues sacred world. At that time, the Bodhi seed said that both of them had the core of the world and that they would definitely meet again in the future. It was just that he did not expect the two of them to meet so quickly. Nietion, I didn't expect that you would also come here. It seems that you have gained some understanding of the core of heaven and earth during this period of time. The Bodhi seed stood coldly in the void. His eyes had actually opened, and he stared at Nietion with a burning gaze. His entire being seemed cold and murderous. During the demonic moon and the heavenly wolf, Nietion saved his life from the hands of the Emperor of the Underworld. However, he and Nietion were never friends. At most, they were fair competitors. At that time, the Bodhi seed was still blind. Who would have thought that he would actually open his eyes now? The Underworld Emperor looked at the Bodhi seed from afar and said coldly, a small fry from the demonic moon celestial wolf sect. I didn't expect you to be a lord now. The Bodhi seed had indeed come from the demonic moon heavenly wolf, but the Emperor of the Underworld did not know his true identity. The Emperor of the Underworld's original plan was to devour the Bodhi seed's Bodhi heart when he awakened the heaven-punishing demon heart again. But later on, the heaven-punishing 9 sacrifices formation was activated, and something happened to Nietion and Lian Jiufeng. At this point, the Bodhi seed had become his true competitor. Nietion glanced at the Underworld Emperor, and then looked at the Bodhi seed. He smiled faintly and said, This is all thanks to your reminder. You let me know that there is more than one heavenly core in this world. The corners of the Bodhi son's mouth curled up into a smile. He glanced at the Underworld Emperor with a strange look in his eyes and said, Nietion, you are a smart man. You should understand that you can't work with tigers and wolves. The Underworld Emperor by your side just wants to use you. He had already figured out that Nietion and the Underworld Emperor were in a cooperative relationship, but he didn't have a good opinion of their cooperation. Thank you for the reminder. Nietion smiled faintly. He was also helpless and had no other choice. The Bodhi seed nodded, then turned and prepared to leave. Bodhi seed, Who do you think you are? How dare you talk back to this emperor? The underworld emperor's face darkened as he spoke in a cold tone. It seemed that he had not gotten used to the difference in status. In the past, no one had ever dared to speak to him like this. Therefore, the Bodhiseed's attitude made him very angry. Emperor of the underworld, you are no longer the master of punishing heaven. The main body of the heaven-punishing demon heart is in Lai Yen Jiufeng's body. The heaven-punishing demon heart inside you is just a secondary body. The Bodhiseed's expression was cold and solemn as he said, "Do you think that a mere secondary body of the heaven-punishing demon heart can withstand the power of 5 tribulations? How did you know?" The underworld emperor's eyes darkened, appearing very surprised. He clearly did not expect the Bodhiseed to know so much about the heaven-punishing demon heart. He even knew about the primary and secondary bodies. The heaven-punishing demon heart had its own unique place among the 9 hearts of heaven and earth. The most mysterious part was that the demon heart had 2 bodies, the main body and the secondary body. What Lai Yen Jiufeng had obtained was the main body of the heaven-punishing demon heart, and what remained in the Emperor of the Underworld's body was the secondary body. When the Emperor of the Underworld had fled, he had used the secondary body of the heaven-punishing demon heart to forcefully control the heaven-punishing gate. Lai Yen Jiufeng had not known about the secret of the heaven-punishing demon heart back then. It was only recently that he realized that a part of the heaven-punishing demon heart was still in the Emperor of the Underworld's body. However, this was a secret that belonged to the heaven-punishing demon heart. Only the Emperor of the Underworld and Lai Yen Jiufeng knew about it. Why did the Bodhiseed know about it too? It seemed that the Bodhiseed knew a lot of secrets about the 9 hearts of heaven and earth. The Bodhiseed smiled coldly at the surprised Emperor of the Underworld. Emperor of the Underworld, the secrets I know are far more than you can imagine. Who are you? The Emperor of the Underworld's eyes darkened as if he had thought of something. His expression changed, and his eyes flowed with fear. Nie Tian could not help but exclaim in surprise when he saw the Emperor of the Underworld's reaction. It was as if the Emperor of the Underworld had discovered some incredible secret from the Bodhiseed. That was why he was so surprised. Is there a need to tell you who I am? The Bodhiseed smiled faintly. His eyes were filled with deep rumination. Nie Tian frowned. His heart sank. It seemed that the Bodhiseed's identity was much deeper than he had thought. What if I insist on knowing? The Emperor of the Underworld's expression darkened. He sneered and glanced at the demon sword. Kid, answer the Emperor of the Underworld's question. The demon sword reacted immediately. With a growl, it took a step forward and unleashed a wave of sword intent that enveloped the Bodhiseed. Boom! In the next instant, the Bodhiseed was imprisoned by the sword intent before he could even react. However, he was not afraid at all. Instead, he smiled faintly. His eyes seemed to be surging with golden light as he stared at the demon sword. The Emperor of the Underworld you speak of is no longer the master of heaven punishing. Are you still loyal to him? The demon sword's eyes trembled. A moment of hesitation flashed across his face, but in the next moment, he growled, "Answer the Emperor of the Underworld's question." The Bodhiseed was still fearless. He shook his head and laughed coldly. What if I don't answer? Die! The demon sword's eyes flashed with murderous intent. As soon as he uttered the word die, an enormous wave of sword intent appeared. Instantly, thousands of waves of demonic chi exploded in the air. The waves of demonic chi rolled towards the Bodhiseed. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes widened. The Bodhiseed was not weak. However, in front of the demon sword, he was like a sheep. He had no way to fight back. If the demon sword's intent landed, the Bodhiseed would definitely die. Who dares to touch the Buddha? At that moment, a furious roar rang out in the air. Like a clap of thunder, the heavens and earth seemed to be torn apart. thousands of rays of Buddha's light appeared. The golden rays were as bright as the sun. In the blink of an eye, the violent sword intent was swept away. Moreover, under the pressure of the Buddha's light, the demon sword had no choice but to retreat a few steps. "Who is it?" The demon sword steadied himself. His eyes were extremely dark as he growled. "Rakshasa Vajra under the Buddha's command." In the next moment, the solemn and powerful voice rang out again. Then, amidst the thousands of rays of Buddha's light, a Buddha appeared. He stepped on a seven-colored holy lotus. Flowers bloomed with every step he took. His entire body shone with Buddha's light, illuminating the entire world. The air was filled with a solemn and sacred atmosphere. "Buddha!" Nye Tian's eyes darkened as he exclaimed in his heart. This was the first time he had seen such a powerful Buddhist cultivator. And at this moment the Rakshasa Vajra Buddha walked step by step. The lotuses beneath his feet shone resplendently as he arrived in front of the Bodhi seed. He bowed slightly and said respectfully, "The Rakshasa Vajra pays his respects to the Buddha." Chapter 3767. Chapter 3762. Transcendence Golden Body. This was the first time Nye Tian had heard of the title Buddha Lord. He couldn't help but feel strange. He was also very confused about the Bodhi seed's true identity. The Rakshas's guardian King Kong's attack had instantly repelled the demon sword. It was clear that this person was no weaker than the demon sword. For such an expert to be so humble in front of the Bodhi seed, it was obvious that the Bodhi seed's status was high. It seemed that these people with the core of heaven and earth were all protected by experts. The Emperor of the Underworld had the demon sword, Devil's Knight had Sima Xiu, Lian Jiufeng had Ghastly, and the Bodhi seed had the Rakshas's guardian King Kong. Only Nye Tian didn't have any experts by his side. Nye Tian couldn't help but worry about the situation. If something big happened next, he couldn't count on the demon sword to help him. "So? Do you still want to kill me?" The Bodhi child's body moved slightly as he broke through the sword intense shackles. There was a calm smile on his face as he looked at the demon sword. "You're courting death." The demon sword's eyes darkened and he roared like a wild beast. The sword will on his body instantly soared to the extreme, causing the surrounding space to tremble. The entire world seemed like it was about to split open. He had just been suppressed by the mysterious ghastly face by Lian Jiufeng's side and had nowhere to vent his anger. Now, he had suffered at the hands of the Bodhi seed and the Rakshas's guardian King Kong. How could he take this lying down? So strong. Nye Tian's expression changed as he sensed the aura of the demon sword's sword intent. The sword aura that the demon sword was displaying was too terrifying. Truly had the power to destroy the world. Even though they were separated by tens of thousands of meters, Nye Tian still felt an extremely strong pressure. He was very curious to see how strong the demon sword was. The Emperor of the Underworld watched from the side and didn't stop him. He really wanted to know how strong the Rakshas's guardian King Kong was. "Kill!" At this moment, Demon Sword roared in a low voice as he slashed out with the heavy sword in his hand. Instantly, the space around him sank as the heavens and earth froze. After that, a gigantic sword shadow appeared, and everywhere the sword passed by, a gigantic spatial tear appeared. The entire heaven and earth was torn apart by the power of the sword shadow. Boom! The gigantic sword shadow descended with a loud rumble and headed straight for the Rakshasa Vajra. Raging Vajra of the sea, demon vanquishing divine hand. The Rakshasa Vajra stood in the same place with a solemn expression. There was no fear on his face. After speaking in a deep voice, he suddenly raised his palm and slapped it out. Under the Buddha's light, a huge golden palm appeared and faced the huge sword shadow. Bang! In the next moment the sword shadow fell, but it was blocked by the giant golden palm, and a dull sound rang out in the void. Break! Immediately after, the Rakshasa Vajra spoke in a deep voice. As soon as his solemn voice fell, the huge golden palm suddenly retracted and gripped the enormous sword shadow tightly before suddenly exerting force. Bang! 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 Immediately after that, an enormous explosion resounded. The enormous sword trembled in midair before exploding into pieces, and then it transformed into boundless sword intent that charged through space. As for the giant golden palm, it swept across the sky and smoothed out the huge crack in the void. Pft! The figure of the demon sword received a strong impact and was knocked back thousands of meters. After stabilizing himself, his body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was like a withered leaf in the wind, trembling in the air, as if he was going to wither at the next moment. The horrifying scene caused the Emperor of the Underworld's expression to change. He was completely stunned and speechless. His original intention was to let the demon sword test the strength of the Rakshasa Vajra. He did not expect the Rakshasa Vajra to be so strong that it could directly injure the demon's sword with a single palm strike. The others were also stunned, deeply shocked by the strength of the Rakshasa Vajra. Previously, the demon's sword had also been suppressed by the ghostly face that had yet to appear. However, that suppression was far less shocking than the current scene. The Rakshasa Vajra did not look strong, but a casual attack from it was earth-shattering. Damn it! At that moment, the demon's sword suddenly roared angrily, and then the sword momentum of its entire body surged. It was even more violent than before, and there was an additional strange aura in the sword intent. Nietion's eyes narrowed. It seemed that the demon sword had used some kind of secret technique. My friend, why do you have to do this? Just now, the Buddha did not use his transcendence golden body, which was already a great concession. Why do you want to die? The Rakshasa Vajra looked at the demon's sword with a cold and expressionless face, and said in a deep voice. It seemed that the palm strike just now was indeed a casual one, and it was far from his true strength. At that moment, Nietion's eyes were trembling, and he could not help but feel nervous. He had no doubt that if the demon sword attacked, it was highly likely that the Rakshasa Vajra would directly kill it. Demon sword, stop! At this critical moment, the Emperor of the Underworld's voice rang out. He no longer had his previous calmness, and there was an unconcealable nervousness in his voice. Hearing the Emperor of the Underworld's words, the demon sword's eyes darkened. His entire body surged with murderous intent, and he did not stop. This time, he had actually disobeyed the Emperor of the Underworld's orders. Die! In the next moment, the demon's sword roared like thunder, and the sword intent all over his body erupted wildly. His entire body melted into the sword intent, and suddenly, the sword momentum around him surged, causing the space within hundreds of thousands of meters to tremble. Seeing this, everyone retreated. With Nietion's current strength, he couldn't even withstand the residual pressure of such a mighty force. Kill! Immediately, the demon's sword roared wildly, and the endless sword intent in the void condensed together. A gigantic sword shadow tens of thousands of meters appeared, and the sword intent surged like the sea. Its aura was majestic and terrifying, and it pressed down on the Rakshasa Vajra. Nietion felt the fluctuations of the sword intent in the void, and he was extremely shocked. Compared to the previous sword, the demon sword's sword was many times more powerful. To be able to burst out such a terrifying sword, he must have paid a great price. However, he did not know if this sword could threaten the Rakshasa Vajra. Transcendence Golden Body, activate. The Rakshasa Vajra stood there coldly, and his body was as still as a mountain. Suddenly, the Buddha's light shone all over his body, and spots of golden light circulated. In an instant, outside his body, a giant golden Buddha that was thousands of meters tall was formed. It was solemn and majestic. This giant golden Buddha was the Rakshasa Vajra's transcendence golden body. It did not look grand, but the Buddha's light shone brightly, and it was holy and majestic. Boom! Immediately, the gigantic sword shadow fell, but it stopped in the void. The giant golden Buddha had actually blocked it. Heaven and earth seemed to stop for a moment. Everything was wrapped in a mysterious force, and it was frozen. Boom! Boom, boom, boom. In the next moment, a muffled explosion was heard, and a crack appeared on the giant sword shadow. Then, it collapsed and turned into endless waves of sword intent, rushing in all directions. Chapter 3768. A bloody scene. The figure that was sent flying left a bloody trail in the void. It retreated for tens of thousands of meters before finally stabilizing itself. This blood-red figure was the demon sword. Even though he had activated his secret technique and used his bloodline to stimulate his sword will to its limit, the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body had blocked it, and he had suffered another serious injury. In the void, there was a violent impact that only calmed down after a long time. The Rakshasa's transcendence golden body stood under the transcendence golden body. There was an obvious sword mark on the top of the Buddha's head, but other than that, he was not injured at all. As for the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body, he was as steady as a mountain, unharmed. His strength was simply too strong. Even the demon sword's all-out attack couldn't hurt him. There was a dead silence in the hall. Everyone's eyes were locked on the Rakshasa's transcendence, their faces full of disbelief. The shock in Nietian's heart couldn't be any greater. The moment the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body was released, he felt an aura similar to the power of bloodline. It seemed that the transcendence golden body was a power similar to bloodline for the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body. How? Bang! After a while, the demon sword's bloodied figure suddenly moved. His eyes trembled as he looked at the Rakshasa's transcendence from afar. He wanted to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, he lost control of the power in his body. His body shook and he exploded, turning into a bloody light in the air. The bloody scene caused people to tremble with fear. The demon sword, the master of the demon wind city, a top powerhouse of the 5 underworld holy world, had died just like that. He did not even get to finish his last sentence. Such an ending was unexpected, and at the same time, it made people sigh. Nietian was stunned by the scene in front of him, and he could not react for a long time. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. The demon sword's all-out attack was so weak in front of the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body. The demon sword's strength was already beyond Nietian's imagination, and the Rakshasa's transcendence golden body was obviously stronger than the demon sword. Nietian guessed that the demon sword should have the strength of a peak heavenly tribulation sage king. The Rakshasa Vajra beside the Bodhi seed was most likely a heavenly enlightenment sage emperor. Heavenly Emperor Tianjue's cultivation might not be as strong as the likes of heavenly ancestor Scarlet Life and Sacred Heart that Nietian had met before. However, with this level of power, he could definitely be considered a true master. There were 6 stages of sages, and the heavenly tribulation stage was a dividing line. Below the heavenly tribulation was the mortal sage stage, and above it was the supreme sage stage. Tianju Holy Emperor was an expert even amongst paramount saints, let alone ordinary saints. Given the strength of the Rakshasa guardian deity, he would definitely be an expert in the entire all-heaven sacred world, let alone the tiny 5 underworld sacred world. For such a person to lower his head before the Bodhi seed, it was enough to prove the Bodhi seed's high status. Demon sword. At this time, the underworld emperor, who had been in a daze for a long time, finally came to his senses and spoke in surprise, his face still stiff. He only wanted the demon sword to test the Rakshasa guardian deity's strength. He didn't think that the demon sword would be killed by the Rakshasa guardian deity in a fit of rage. Originally, the demon sword was the only expert by his side, and he was being suppressed by the other experts. Now he, the underworld emperor, had lost his only protector. Nietian's expression was just as ugly. No matter what, he and the Underworld Emperor had a cooperative relationship. The demon sword's accidental death was definitely bad news for the two of them. Lord Underworld Emperor, he was the one who wanted to die. You can't blame the Rakshasa guardian deity. The Bodhiseed's cold and arrogant voice resounded in the air. The Underworld Emperor was still in a daze. He couldn't react for a long time. The Bodhiseed's lips curled into a cold smile. He glanced at the Underworld Emperor playfully before leaving with the Rakshasa guardian deity. Lian Jiufeng and Devil's Knight were also very shocked, but they didn't attack Nie Tian and the Underworld Emperor right now. Instead, they left with their guards. Let's go, Underworld Emperor. Nie Tian smiled bitterly with a helpless expression. At this moment, he already felt that he was in imminent danger. It was impossible for him to save Lan Zhuing. He could only take it one step at a time. The Underworld Emperor calmed down after a long time. He glanced at the place where the demon sword had died one last time, then turned around and left. Nie Tian, the power of the 5 tribulations will definitely alert the major forces of the 5 underworld sacred world. However, these people don't know what the power of the 5 tribulations is. The ones who are truly difficult to deal with are those who possess the core of the world. On the way, the Underworld Emperor said to Nie Tian with a gloomy expression, "If we want to win in the upcoming battle, the most important thing right now is to find an expert." Nie Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly when he heard the Underworld Emperor's words. Finding an expert was easier said than done. But how were they going to find one? Even a guy like the Demon Sword had died at the hands of the Rakshasa Vajra. What was the use of finding some other mediocre experts? Brother and sister of the Tong clan, Nie Tian saved your lives. Shouldn't the two of you help him this once? The Underworld Emperor's gaze suddenly froze as he looked at Tong Dakian and Tong Qingling. This. Tong Dakian frowned, and his expression instantly became awkward. The Tong clan was a large clan with influence all over the sacred world. In the 5 underworld sacred world, it was only a branch clan of the Tong clan. However, even a branch clan was considered a first-rate force in the 5 underworld sacred world. There was still some unresolved issues between Tong Dakian and Nie Tian. However, Nie Tian had indeed saved him, so he was grateful and wanted to help Nie Tian. More importantly, he didn't have a high status in the Tong clan. The experts that Nie Tian and the Underworld Emperor wanted were at least peak Heavenly Tribulation Martial Kings. There were only a handful of such experts in the entire 5 underworld sacred world, and most of them were old monsters who were in closed-door training. It was impossible for him to invite these experts alone. Brother Nie, it's not that I don't want to help you, but I really can't help you with the experts you need, Tong Dakian said awkwardly with a tense face. It's okay. Nie Tian didn't care. He smiled faintly and said, I'll think of a way myself. Then, Nie Tian and the others quickly entered the 5 Tribulations mountain range and finally saw the full view of the main peak of the 5 Tribulations mountain range. The 5 main peaks were like the backbone of a giant headless beast. Looking down from above, it was majestic and shocking. At this time, many martial artists had gathered in the sky above the 5 main peaks. There were tens of thousands of people at a glance. It was obvious that these people had come for the power of the 5 tribulations. However, most people didn't know what the power of the 5 tribulations was. At this time, Nie Tian suddenly smelled blood, which made him frown. Then, he turned around and looked into the void. Chapter 3769. Chapter 3764. Chapter 3764. Violent and unreasonable. The bloody scene in the sky made Nie Tian's face darken, and his eyes burst with anger. That red-clothed young man was too cruel. He actually ate people's hearts. The crowd was also shocked by the scene in front of them. They trembled and looked at the red-clothed young man in horror. Ha ha! This heart has a smell. The red-clothed young man did not care about the crowd's gaze at all. Instead, he laughed wildly, and then suddenly grabbed the top of the woman's head with one hand. Then a strange and horrifying scene happened. The woman who had already died was sucked dry by the red-clothed young man in an instant, turning into a dried corpse. What the red-clothed young man did was too cruel. He ate people's hearts and sucked people's blood like a fierce beast. The poor woman did not have time to react at all and died tragically. The red-clothed young man's cruel behavior immediately caused a discussion among the crowd. Who is this red-clothed warrior? How could he be so cruel to kill a female warrior in front of so many people? I don't know. This red-clothed warrior looks young, but he is very strong. He is already a heavenly mandate realm 5th level Saint Master. I have never heard of such a cruel person among the young geniuses of the 5 underworld holy worlds. The power of the 5 calamities has been activated. The warriors in the nearby holy worlds have all heard the news. This red-clothed warrior must be from another holy world. Yeah, this person is from another holy world, but he came to our 5 underworld holy world and killed people so brutally. This is not only insolence, he simply doesn't put our 5 underworld holy world in his eyes. He's slapping our face. As the crowd spoke, their expressions began to become agitated. They were all filled with righteous indignation, but no one took the initiative to stand out. The red-clothed warrior was insolent and cruel, but his strength was there for all to see. Ordinary people would not dare to provoke him. Furthermore, for him to have such strength at such a young age, he was a rare genius. This meant that there might be a huge force hiding behind him. No one present was stupid. No one would provoke an unknown enemy because of the death of a stranger. This is the first time I came to the 5 underworld holy world. I didn't expect the hearts of the female warriors here to be so delicious. It's really delicious. The red-clad cultivator swept his gaze across the crowd. He was incomparably arrogant as he laughed loudly, not caring about the crowd at all. From his words, it seemed that this guy liked to eat human hearts, and he liked to eat women's hearts. When the surrounding female cultivators saw the red-clothed cultivator, their expressions immediately changed. They were all horrified and started to retreat subconsciously. What? Are you all scared? The corners of the red-clad cultivator's lips curled up, and a sinister smile appeared on his handsome and sinister face. He said loudly, "All of you, listen up. Today, this holy sun is being very kind and will only eat the hearts of 10 women. If someone takes the initiative to come up and sacrifice themselves, this holy sun will save himself a lot of trouble. If no one is willing to sacrifice themselves, I might get angry, and then I might eat even more hearts." When the crowd heard the red-clothed cultivator's words, their faces could not help but freeze. They did not expect that there would be people in this world who would be so cruel, eating people's hearts and even wanting them to take the initiative to offer sacrifices. Unreasonable and ruthless. Nye Tion's eyes darkened. He roared in his heart and took a step forward. The red-clothed cultivator's actions made him very angry. Since no one is willing to sacrifice themselves, then this holy sun can only do it myself. At this time, the red-clothed cultivator smiled coldly and moved. He turned into a cold, sinister light in the air and flew towards a woman. Bang! In the next instant, a loud explosion was heard. The woman did not have time to react at all, and her heart was directly hollowed out. Her entire body was instantly turned into a dried corpse. On the other side, the red-clothed cultivator's figure froze. He was holding a bloody heart in his hand. With a sinister smile, he raised his head and swallowed it. Everyone's eyes widened in shock, but no one made a move to stop him. Damn it! A cold look appeared in Nye Tion's eyes as he let out a bellow. Just as he was about to charge over, however, he sensed an extremely powerful force rapidly enveloping him. This sudden scene made his expression change, and his heart sank inexplicably. "Kid, you'd better behave yourself and just watch from the side." At this time, that strong force suddenly descended. Like an invisible giant hand, it restrained Nyetian. Then, a low voice sounded, cold and threatening. Secret guard. Nyetian's eyes narrowed. He instantly understood that there were many powerful cultivators hiding around the red-clothed cultivator. At this moment, the person who was controlling him was one of the dark guards. It seemed like the red-clothed cultivator had a very powerful background. There must be more than one secret guard hiding around him. These powerful cultivators were secretly protecting the red-clothed cultivator, so no one dared to act recklessly. Like this, everyone present became meat on the red-clothed cultivator's plate. He could eat whoever he wanted to eat. At this time, Fat Cat's voice sounded, Nyetian, this person is too strong. Don't be rash. Fat Cat was afraid that Nyetian would act rashly and forcefully break free of the person's restraint. Although this person did not show himself, Fat Cat could sense that this person was at least on the same level as the demon sword. In fact, he might not be any weaker than the Rakshasa guardian deity. With Nyetian's strength, he would be killed if he resisted even a little. Bastard! Nyetian's eyes were murderous. He roared in his heart. He did not expect things to turn out like this. He swept his gaze across the others. Lian Jiufeng, Devil's Knight, Bodhi Seed, and the others were all present. They were all protected by powerful cultivators, but they chose to watch from the sidelines. They had no intention of interfering. Lian Jiufeng and Devil's Knight could be ignored. After all, they did not care about the lives of others. But Bodhi Seed and the Rakshasa guardian deity were Buddhas. Shouldn't they be compassionate? Why were they so indifferent to the bloody scene before them? Ha ha! The female cultivators of the 5 underworld sacred world are really not bad. At this time, the red-clothed cultivator became even more arrogant. He laughed maniacally and said, You scum, you just stand there and watch as I eat all these people. Are you all trash? His voice was very loud and arrogant. It was obvious that he did not care about the people present at all. Some cultivators with a conscience were angry, but they could not attack. Many of them were restrained by the red-clothed cultivator's dark guards. Ha ha! I have a good appetite today. Let me eat a few more. Following that, the red-clothed cultivator laughed wildly. His figure suddenly moved, and he rushed toward a female cultivator. That female cultivator suddenly felt the killing intent. She was so scared that her face turned pale and she screamed, No! Chapter 3770. Biting off more than one can chew. Chapter 3765. Overestimating one's capabilities. Bang! In the next instant, an evil light flashed in the air. The female cultivator's body trembled and instantly turned into a dried corpse. The cultivator in red appeared on the other side, holding a bloody heart in his hand. His eyes were like those of a ferocious beast, staring at the heart greedily and swallowing it. Delicious, delicious, ha ha! With the fresh heart in his stomach, the cultivator in red had a satisfied look on his face and laughed maniacally. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them with indescribable shock in their expressions. It was hard to imagine what kind of situation a person had to grow up to become so cruel and ruthless. Ha ha! Trash from the 5 underworld holy world, listen up. Today, I will humiliate you all and make you remember today's humiliation forever. At this time, the cultivator in red's eyes flashed with cold light. He swept his cold gaze over everyone present and spoke in an extremely arrogant manner. You bastard, you indiscriminately slaughter the innocent, suck people's blood chi, and eat people's hearts. Such heinous crimes, you must suffer the wrath of the heavens. Just as his voice faded away, a martial artist stood up and angrily cursed. Punished by the heavens? The cultivator in red's eyes darkened, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He smiled coldly and said, I am the heavens. You are dog sh*t. That person was not afraid at all and directly scolded him. You are seeking death. The cultivator in red's face darkened, and his aura suddenly fluctuated. Then, he struck out with his palm, and a bloody palm shadow appeared. Before that cultivator could even react, the palm shadow directly killed him. The bloody light in the air dissipated, and the surroundings turned dark red. The air was filled with the smell of blood. "You are just a piece of trash and you dare to provoke me? You are seeking death." After killing that cultivator, the cultivator in red smiled coldly, and the muscles on his face trembled slightly. Everyone was horrified, and they kept quiet out of fear. After a while, the cultivator in red seemed to have had enough fun. He slowly stretched his limbs and said lazily, "All right, let's call it a day." When everyone saw this scene, their tense nerves immediately relaxed, as if they had just finished a nightmare. However, in the next moment, the red-clothed warrior seemed to have discovered something and suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His eyes flashed with a pleasantly surprised light as he abruptly turned around to look at a female warrior. Unexpectedly, he was ecstatic and laughed loudly. "So there is a female warrior with bloodline Do-Chi here. Ha ha ha, I'm in luck today." "Huh!" When Ye Tian heard the red-clothed cultivator's words, he frowned and his expression suddenly changed. The martial artist in red was none other than Tong Daqian's younger sister, Tong Qingling. Oh no! Ye Tian's heart sank as he growled. Tong Qingling had just been rescued from the bestial battle arena. Now, he was being targeted by this ruthless red-clothed cultivator. This was really troublesome. Second brother. Tong Qingling was so frightened by the red-clothed cultivator that her face turned pale. She called out to Tong Daqian and subconsciously hid behind the ladder. "Little sister, don't be afraid. With your second brother here, no one can hurt you." Tong Daqian took a step forward and growled. His whole body's aura surged crazily as he protected Tong Qingling behind him. "Overconfident ant, scram for this holy sun." The cultivator in red sneered and said disdainfully, "You want to touch my little sister? Kill me first." Tong Daqian was not afraid at all as he growled in a low voice. "Sure." The red-clothed cultivator's mouth twitched and he chuckled. "This is a good opportunity for me to see how powerful the legendary bloodline Do-Chi is." Boom. Tong Daqian did not respond. Instead, his whole body shook, and blood-red Do-Chi was suddenly released. His whole body's aura was pushed to an extremely terrifying level. "Red Do-Chi." Ye Tian's eyes narrowed slightly as he exclaimed inwardly. He did not know much about the Do-Chi bloodline, but he knew that red Do-Chi was almost Tong Daqian's limit. Actually, Tong Daqian could still release black Do-Chi, but that would be a suicidal method. "Ha ha ha, come on." The red-clothed cultivator was extremely arrogant and did not take Tong Daqian seriously at all. "Kill!" In the next instant, Tong Daqian roared and slashed the sky with his tyrant saber. A blood-red saber shadow appeared under this slash, and it suppressed the heaven and earth with a loud rumble. It was like a boundless red cloud, and it attacked the red-clothed cultivator. However, the red-clothed cultivator did not dodge at all. Instead, he took a step forward, and his whole body's aura was suddenly released. A long black spear appeared in his hand, and a spear shadow that was like a black dragon whizzed out with a loud rumble. Boom! Then, the spear shadow and the saber shadow collided, and there was an explosive sound in the air. Then, endless wild waves surged out. In the next instant, under the endless wild waves, a figure was sent flying backward. It was Tong Daqian. "Second brother!" Tong Qingling exclaimed in surprise. She moved her body and caught Tong Daqian. However, Tong Daqian's entire body was currently dripping with blood. His flesh and blood had been torn apart, and even some of his exposed bones had been shattered. "This guy is so powerful!" Everyone was shocked by the scene in front of them. At this moment, Ye Tian could not help but frown, and his expression was very ugly. Tong Daqian's desperate slash that released his red battle aura was actually easily blocked by the red-clothed cultivator, and he was even severely injured. The red-cloved cultivator's strength could be imagined. One had to know that when Nye Tian fought with Tong Dakian that day, he had only won by a narrow margin. Little sister, second brother is useless. I can't save you. Tong Dakian lay in Tong Qingling's arms and used all his strength to speak. Then, he immediately fainted. Second brother. Tong Qingling could feel Tong Dakian's life aura disappearing rapidly. She shouted loudly, completely at a loss of what to do. This bastard! Nye Tian's heart trembled, and he growled in a low voice like thunder. If he made a move now, he should be able to save Tong Dakian. But now, he was restrained by someone in the dark, and he could not even move, let alone make a move. Little girl, although your brother is also a bloodline battle or a cultivator, a man's blood and heart are too dirty. I'm not interested. At this moment, the red-cloved cultivator smiled coldly and walked toward Tong Qingling step by step. As he walked, he said, "The blood and heart of a virgin like you are what I love the most." What do you want? Tong Qingling's eyes trembled. Obviously, she was extremely frightened, and even her voice was trembling. What do you think? The red-cloved cultivator smiled evilly. Then, his figure turned into a black light and flew toward Tong Qingling. Everyone's heart trembled, and they seemed to have already seen the scene of Tong Qingling becoming A**S***. However, at this moment of life and death, a sudden change occurred. Chapter 3771. The evil heart. The sudden scene caused everyone's eyes to narrow as their expressions changed. Who would have thought that someone would attack the red-shirt cultivator? Bang! In the next instant, a dull thud was heard as the figure of the red-shirt cultivator was blocked by the nine-colored light. His figure sank in the air and came to a stop on the spot. Who's there? His face was cold as he let out a low roar. He suddenly raised his head and saw a devastatingly beautiful figure standing high up in the sky. She was like a snow lotus blooming on an ice mountain. It was a woman with beautiful facial features. Her perfect figure could be vaguely seen as her white robe fluttered in the wind. The strangest thing was that her eyes were as bright as the stars, flickering with nine-colored light. This woman is so beautiful! The crowd was stunned. They could not help but exclaim as they looked at the woman. They had even forgotten about the tragic scene that had just taken place. This woman was too beautiful, so beautiful that it was hard to believe that there was such an outstanding person in this world. Although she stood there as cold as an iceberg, she was as dazzling as the sun, causing everyone to feel ashamed of their inferiority. Ruoyu. Nye Tian's eyes widened as he stared at the figure. He uttered the latter's name in astonishment. He had never imagined that the person who would appear at this moment would actually be Rainy Thousand Leaves. He had entered the 5 underworld sacred world with Rui Qianyu and Cher, but they were separated when they entered. Cher was trapped in an illusion by the Emperor of the underworld. She was in a terrible situation, but her life was not in danger. Nye Tian was still worried about Rui Qianyu. He did not expect the latter to appear at this moment. However, judging from the current situation, Rui Qianyu's appearance was not a good timing. It was definitely not a good thing for her to block the red-shirt cultivator as soon as she made her move. Tong Qingling came to her senses at this moment. She raised her head abruptly and saw a peerlessly exquisite face, causing her to be stunned. Her expression froze and she was speechless for a long time. Rui Qianyu stood coldly in the sky, like an iceberg that would never melt in 10,000 years, cold and murderous. She didn't speak. Her eyes flickered with nine-colored light. She didn't even look at the red-clothed martial artist. A female martial artist. The martial artist in red looked at Rui Qianyu and was stunned for a few seconds. He finally reacted and let out a cry of surprise. Then, a fanatical smile appeared on his face. He sneered and said, "A female martial artist with 9-colored pupils. Ah no." The next moment, he suddenly sensed something. His eyes trembled, and he looked abnormally excited, like a hungry wolf suddenly seeing a little lamb. He chuckled and said, "It's a martial artist with 9 colored pupils who has fused with the heaven and earth saint runes." At this moment, the red-clad cultivator's expression was not one of frustration at being stopped. Instead, it was one of boundless joy. The blood energy and heart of a female martial practitioner with 9 colored pupils with saint patterns would definitely be very interesting. The 9 colored pupils were the alternate pupils of heaven and earth. However, to be able to open the 9th pupil like Rui Qianyu and successfully fuse with the heaven and earth saint runes was definitely one of a kind. Even in the all heavens sacred world, there was not a single martial artist like her. The alternate pupils fused with the heaven and earth saint runes. Such a technique was indeed shocking. Oh no. Everyone's expression changed when they saw the red-clad cultivator's reaction. Their eyes froze. Even an idiot could tell that the red-clad cultivator had taken a fancy to Rui Qianyu's blood energy and heart. "Little girl, if you don't resist, I can give you a quick death." The red-clad cultivator smiled coldly. His eyes were filled with undisguised murderous intent. "Make your move," Rui Qianyu said expressionlessly. Her beautiful eyes were cold and solemn, and her face was expressionless. A hot-tempered little colt. Interesting. The red-clad cultivator smiled coldly. Then, he moved again. His entire body turned into a beam of cold light. Like an arrow released from a bow, he attacked Rui Qianyu. "Watch out!" Everyone's hearts trembled when they saw that, and they cried out in unison. Although they did not dare to make a move, they did not want to see anything happen to Rui Qianyu. Whoosh! Rui Qianyu stood coldly in the void. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and a 9-colored pupil power was released. It formed a shield around her body, and the 9-colored light flowed, making her look like a goddess descending to the mortal world. Boom! 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 The red-clad cultivator's figure was like a bolt of black lightning. Wherever he passed, he left several black rays in the void. He attacked Rui Qianyu, but all of them were blocked by the shield around her body. This female cultivator is so strong. She can actually block that guy's attack. Everyone's eyes trembled and they were shocked. It should be known that Rui Qianyu's cultivation was only at the heavenly mandate 1st level, while the red-clad cultivator had the strength of a heavenly mandate 5th level. The gap between the two was almost overwhelming. But Rui Qianyu could easily block the red-clad cultivator's attack. How could they not be shocked? The 9-colored saint pattern is indeed extraordinary. The red-clad cultivator's figure appeared, and the corner of his mouth curled into a sinister smile. He said coldly, "But in front of me, even the 9-colored saint pattern is not enough." Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, his body shook. Suddenly, an extremely terrifying dark aura appeared and circulated around his body. It actually formed a faint shadow of an evil spirit outside his body. In the next instant, a dark and evil aura spread, covering the surrounding space of hundreds of thousands of meters. What is this aura? The crowd felt the evil aura coming from the void, and their expressions changed instantly. Under the shroud of this evil aura, everyone actually felt a strong suppression, and even breathing became difficult. There were many strong cultivators present, and the red-clad cultivator was only a heavenly mandate 5th level Saint Master. How could the aura he released be so strong that it could suppress so many strong cultivators? This guy is strange. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly darkened, and his expression suddenly changed. He even exclaimed in his heart. At this moment, there was an extremely strong sense of foreboding in his heart. Come on, let me see if your 9-colored saint pattern can block the power of the evil heart of all evil. At this time, the red-clad cultivator smiled coldly, and then his hands formed a strange seal. Suddenly, the dark evil power all over his body suddenly condensed and turned into a sharp black blade. It suddenly shot out, piercing through the air, and attacked Rui Qianyu. The evil heart of all evil. When Nye Tian heard these 4 words, his eyes suddenly narrowed, and his expression froze. At this moment, he finally understood that this red-clad cultivator was a guy who possessed the heart of heaven and earth, and his heart of heaven and earth was called the evil heart of all evil. Boom! In an instant, Nye Tian reacted, and suddenly the power of the stars in his body surged, tumbling violently like a vast ocean. Nye Tian, what are you doing? Fat Cat suddenly felt that something was wrong and shouted anxiously. Chapter 3772. A hidden helper. Nye Tian, don't be rash. Fat Cat suddenly realized that Nye Tian was going to force his way out. His face turned pale, and his voice became shrill. The person who had imprisoned Nye Tian in the dark was at least at the level of a peak Saint King, while Nye Tian was merely a Saint Master who had just ascended to the heavenly mandate realm. The difference between the two of them could not even be described as the difference between heaven and earth. If Nye Tian wanted to force his way out, he might anger the secret guard, and the latter might kill him directly. The anger of a peak Saint King was not something that Nye Tian could withstand. Moreover, Fat Cat felt that with Nye Tian's current cultivation, there was no way he could break out of the secret guard's imprisonment. He might even be suppressed to death. But at this moment, Nye Tian's eyes were bloodshot. Flames burned in his eyes, and the power of the stars in his body was extremely violent. Rui Qianyu was facing a warrior who possessed the heart of heaven and earth, so Nye Tian had no choice but to fight with his life on the line. If the red-clothed warrior was just an ordinary genius, Nye Tian would not worry about Rui Qianyu at all. With Rui Qianyu's strength, an ordinary warrior at the 5th level of the heavenly mandate realm was not enough to pose a threat to her. But a heart of heaven and earth warrior was completely different. So far, all the heart of heaven and earth warriors that Nye Tian had met were all shocking figures. Emperor of the Underworld, Cher, Lian Jiufeng, Devil's Knight, Bodhi Seed. These people were all peerless geniuses. This red-clothed warrior had the heart of all evil, which sounded like an extremely terrifying heart of heaven and earth. It was definitely not something that Rui Qianyu could contend with. And do you want to resist? At this moment, the secret guard felt the power in Nye Tian's body surging. He could not help but sneer and transmit his voice. If you want to die, I don't mind fulfilling your wish. Come. Nye Tian didn't care. He let out a low roar, and suddenly, the power of the stars surged out from his body, causing the space around him to make an inexplicable muffled sound. Boom! However, in the next moment, he felt an even more terrifying power pressing down on him. It was incomparably vast and instantly pressed down on his body, making him unable to resist at all. At this moment, what he experienced was deep despair and powerlessness. No matter how frightening his talent was, he was only a warrior of the 1st tier of the heavenly mandate realm. There was no way he could compete with a warrior at the peak of the Saint King realm. Puff! In an instant, Nye Tian's body trembled and he spat out a mouthful of blood. But his eyes were fixed on Rui Qianyu in the distance, and the star energy in his body was still being released crazily. He would not give up until the very last moment. Bang! At this moment, the dark blade directly landed on Rui Qianyu's eye power shield. With a muffled sound, a glaring crack appeared on the eye power shield. However, the eye power shield formed by the Saint Pattern's 9-color eyes still managed to block the attack of the warrior in red. Puff! Even so, Rui Qianyu still suffered from the impact. Her delicate body trembled slightly, and she spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face suddenly became much paler. After all, her Saint Pattern's 9-color eyes had just been born not long ago. Such a severe consumption of eye power was a great burden on the Saint Pattern itself. But at this moment, the only thing in her body that could fight against the warrior in red was the Saint Pattern's 9-color eyes. Ruoyu! Nye Tian's pupils suddenly shrank when he saw that Rui Qianyu was injured. He suddenly roared and released the power of the stars in his body even more violently, causing the void to tremble. Nie Tian. At this moment, Rui Qinyu saw Nie Tian. Her beautiful eyes flashed, and her cold gaze instantly became affectionate. The reason she had come here was to find Nie Tian. She had learned from other cultivators that the power of the 5 tribulations would be activated in the 5 tribulations mountain range. She had predicted that Nie Tian would definitely appear, so she had rushed here. However, when she arrived and saw the scene of the warrior in red killing Tong Qingling, she immediately attacked without hesitation. What surprised her was that Nie Tian was actually here. However, in the next moment, her gaze suddenly darkened, and her delicate face became ugly. She had already discovered that Nie Tian was being suppressed by a force. Little girl, your Saint Pattern's 9-color eyes is more powerful than I expected. However, how long can you last under the influence of the 10,000 evil heart? At this moment, the warrior in red's sinister voice sounded. Bam! As soon as he finished speaking, another ray of black light appeared and bombarded the eye barrier. The cracks on the barrier instantly widened and spread throughout the entire barrier. It was obvious that the barrier was on the verge of collapse and could no longer hold on. Rui Qianyu's body trembled again. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and even tears of blood flowed from her eyes. Damn it! When Nie Tian saw this, he instantly roared like a wild beast. The power of the stars in his body and the heavenly Tao shackles circulated and released at the same time, trying to forcefully break free. Aunt, you're courting death. That dark guard was obviously enraged by Nie Tian. He roared and instantly released an even more powerful pressure, pressing down on Nie Tian. In an instant, Nie Tian felt a huge force pressing down on him. His entire body instantly swelled up as if it was about to be forcefully crushed. The pressure from a peak sage king was unbearable even with his powerful martial body. Arg! In that moment of life and death, Nie Tian suddenly heard a scream. It came from the dark guard hiding in the air. In the next moment, he sensed a bloody smell. Then, the dark guard's aura strangely disappeared. Following that, the pressure on his body disappeared in an instant, causing him to be stunned for a moment. It seemed as if someone had attacked the dark guard. There was even a possibility that the person had killed the dark guard. Nie Tian's eyes trembled with surprise and delight. It seemed like there was another expert hiding in the air, and this expert was helping him. Bang! At that moment, a shattering sound rang out, and a wave of eye power rippled through the air. Nie Tian suddenly raised his head and saw that the barrier around Rui Qianyu's body had shattered. As for Rui Qianyu, there was blood at the corner of her mouth. Her face was as pale as a sheet, and tears of blood flowed from the corners of her eyes. She had consumed too much of her eye power, and her Saint Rune 9-color eyes were overburdened, causing tears of blood to flow from them. Little girl, your Saint Rune 9-color eyes has been broken. What other methods do you have to resist? The cultivator in red laughed coldly. His eyes were filled with excitement as he stared at Rui Qianyu. He seemed to have gone insane. It's over. Everyone's eyes trembled violently as they cried out in their hearts. Rui Qianyu had always relied on her Saint Rune 9-color eyes to fight against the cultivator in red. Now that her Saint Rune 9-color eyes had been broken, she was in danger. Rui Qianyu stood coldly in the air. Her face was expressionless. There was no sadness or joy on her face. She was cold and murderous. Little girl, obediently accept your death. The cultivator in red smiled sinisterly. His figure instantly moved, turning into a beam of black light as he attacked. Chapter 3773. Chapter 3768. The Holy Child, While the red-cloved cultivator was in midair, he suddenly felt a huge pressure. He could not help but exclaim in shock. Bang! But in the next moment, before he could even react, a huge sword shadow fell. He shuddered and was sent flying. Like a kite with a broken string, he fell straight to the ground. Your Highness! At almost the same time, several exclamations resounded in the air. They seemed to be very panicked. Then, a dozen or so auras appeared. Almost all the hidden guards in the air were alarmed. However, at this time, the red-clothed cultivator suddenly stabilized his body. A pair of blood-red wings appeared on his back. When fully extended, they were hundreds of meters long and covered his back. They were as dazzling and bright as the sunset. What's going on? The spectators were all startled by this sudden scene as they exclaimed in shock. After which, they turned their gazes to the air, only to see a silver-haired swordsman coldly standing there. Sword intent gushed forth from his entire body, akin to an unsheathed sword, gleaming with sharpness, exuding an extremely murderous aura. Who is this? Is he the one who injured the red-clothed cultivator? Everyone's eyes trembled as they stared at the silver-haired swordsman in shock. The shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. No one had thought that a cultivator would suddenly appear and block the red-clothed cultivator. Nietian. Rui Qianyu's eyes trembled when she saw the silver-haired cultivator. She cried out in joy. It's fine. Leave this guy to me. Nietian smiled faintly and motioned for Rui Qianyu to retreat. Nietian. At this time, the Emperor of the Underworld, Lian Jiufeng, and the others saw that the person who had attacked was Nietian. Aside from surprise, there was also confusion. Of course, they knew the relationship between Nietian and Rui Qianyu, but they were very curious how Nietian had escaped the hidden guards. One had to know that even Lian Jiufeng, who was protected by Ghost Face, was being watched closely by the hidden guards. He had no chance to attack. Of course, Lian Jiufeng couldn't do anything. The problem was, how could Nietian get rid of the dark guards? Nie Tianling stood in the air. His eyes were gloomy and filled with killing intent as he stared at the cultivator in red. At this moment, he felt that there were more than 10 auras in the void. Each of them was extremely terrifying, and all of them had locked onto him, glaring at him like a tiger eyeing its prey. These people were the secret guards by the red-robed martial artist's side, and it was estimated that every one of them had the cultivation of a peak Saint King. This red-robed ancient martial art practitioner had more than 10 peak holy kings by his side, so one could imagine just how high his status was. It should be known that a pinnacle Sage King powerhouse was already a pinnacle powerhouse in a world like the 5 Underworld Holy World. The red-robed martial artist had more than 10 peak stage Saint Kings guarding him, which meant that he came from an extremely powerful force, and his identity was no small matter. All of you back off. I'm going to kill this brat myself. At this moment, the red-clad cultivator flapped his wings and soared into the sky. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he spoke coldly. When everyone heard the red-robed ancient martial art practitioner's words, they could not help but be pleasantly surprised. If it was a secret guard who made a move, he would definitely be able to kill Nietian in an instant. That would be too boring. If it was the battle between the red-robed ancient martial art practitioner and Nietian, it would be very exciting. All right, come on. The corners of Nietian's mouth curled up into a cold smile as he spoke in a sinister manner. The auras of more than 10 secret guards appearing in the surroundings at the same time really surprised him, but he was not too afraid. He already knew that there was a powerhouse secretly helping him in the dark. Since that expert could easily take care of a dark guard, the other dark guards shouldn't pose any threat to him. However, the red-robed ancient martial art practitioner wanted to fight him alone, which was exactly what he wanted. Brat, I'll make an exception for you today. After I kill you later, I'll suck your blood and swallow your heart. The red-robed ancient martial art practitioner's eyes were like those of a venomous wolf, suffused with a sinister cold light as he spoke coldly. He was only interested in a woman's blood and heart, but for the sake of Nietian, he was willing to make an exception. Is that so? Nie Tianling smiled coldly, showing extreme disdain and contempt in his eyes. Brat, you're dead meat. The red-robed ancient martial art practitioner sensed Nie Tian's disdain and was instantly enraged. With a roar, the wings on his back suddenly flapped, and his entire body was like a ball of scarlet flames as he pounced towards Nyetian. "Good timing," Nyetian said with a stern face. In an instant, all the sword intent in his body exploded to the extreme, and he directly activated the soul of the sky. The fiend god's sword intent was like a raging wave, surging in the void. The sword of the sky suddenly slashed across, and suddenly, heaven and earth became solemn. An intense sword cry rang out, resounding through the 9 heavens. Boom! In the next instant, the shadow of the sword descended like a dragon and smashed into the fireball in the void. Instantly, the space turned sluggish. After that, the crimson fireball was sent flying, and the air was filled with an incomparably pungent smell of blood. Everyone's expression changed when they saw this scene, and they were so shocked that they couldn't speak. No one had expected that such an arrogant martialist in red would actually be unable to withstand a single blow from Nyetian. At this moment, the martialist in red stabilized his body in the void, but there was a dripping blood at the corner of his mouth. His blood seemed to contain some kind of extremely strong aura, and at the same time, a pungent smell spread through the void. At the same time, there was also an extremely evil aura. The 10,000 evil heart can't be this weak, right? The Bodhi-seed looked at the martialist in red from afar, smiled faintly, and muttered, "If the 10,000 evil skies holy sun only has this kind of strength, then it's too disappointing." The 10,000 evil skies holy sun. This was the true identity of the martialist in red. If Nyetian heard about the 10,000 evil sky, he would definitely be extremely shocked. He had already heard about the 10,000 evil sky from Lan Zhuing, and he also knew that there was an extraordinary connection between the 10,000 evil sky and the high paradise sky. More importantly, there was a rule between the 10,000 evil sky and the high paradise sky: fated entanglement. The so-called fated entanglement referred to the marriage agreement between the high paradise sky's holy daughter and the 10,000 evil sky's holy son. Furthermore, the holy son and holy daughter of the two great factions were siblings. When the time was right, they would have to get married and complete their fated union. According to Lan Zhuing, the high paradise sky and the 10,000 evil sky both believed in a common principle: only those who would be entangled for eternity would become siblings in this life. This was such a heaven-defying method, and yet it was said in such a dignified manner. It was truly disgusting. Lan Zhuing had not been willing to marry the 10,000 evil sky's holy son. To be more precise, she had not been willing to marry her biological brother, which was why she had fled the marriage. If Nyetian knew that the red-robed man before him was the 10,000 evil sky's holy son, he would have understood that the latter was Lan Zhuing's biological brother. Chapter 3774. Death God's Scythe. A black scythe appeared in the holy son of all evil's hand. His aura immediately changed, and he seemed even more sinister. The black scythe continued to release streams of sinister aura that circulated around the holy son of evil's body, causing the scarlet wings on his back to dim significantly. What kind of power is this? It's so terrifying. Everyone's eyes trembled when they felt the sinister energy in the void. They felt like they were about to suffocate under the envelopment of this aura. The sinister energy was too terrifying. It was as if it could seep into one's bones and soul, making one shudder. The evil heart's origin weapon, Death God's Scythe. The Bodhi-seed's eyes trembled when he saw the black scythe in the holy son of all evil's hand. The black scythe was called the Death God's Scythe. It was the evil heart's origin weapon, just like the sky sword and the sky heart. The Bodhi-seed's eyes trembled as he looked at the Death God's Scythe. There was an unconcealable fear in his eyes. He had seen Nyetian's sky sword before, but it hadn't been this expression. If the Death God's Scythe had been an ordinary origin weapon, he naturally wouldn't have been so afraid. However, the Death God's Scythe wasn't ordinary. It had unsealed a heaven and earth seal. He had never imagined that the death god's scythe would actually unseal a heaven and earth seal. The heaven and earth seal was the key to unleashing the origin weapon's power. It turned out that every heaven and earth heart could nurture an origin weapon after awakening. The origin weapon of the heaven and earth heart contained 9 heaven and earth seals. It was said that the origin weapon of the heaven and earth heart was too powerful. That was why there were 9 heaven and earth seals that suppressed the origin weapon's power. Every time an origin weapon unsealed, a heaven and earth seal was unsealed, the origin weapon would release more power. It could be said that every unsealed heaven and earth seal would increase the origin weapon's power by leaps and bounds. Whether it was Nyetion's sky sword or the Bodhiseed's Bodhi pearl, none of them had been able to unseal a heaven and earth seal. However, the Holy Son of All Evil's Grim Reaper scythe had unsealed a heaven and earth seal. That was why the Bodhiseed was so surprised when he saw the Grim Reaper scythe. The aura on this scythe is so evil. At this moment, Nyetion felt a strong sense of danger from the death god scythe. His expression changed, and his heart was filled with shock. "Brat, you should be content to die under my death god's scythe." The Holy Son of Evil's eyes shuddered. His face was filled with a dark aura, giving him a strange appearance. Whoosh! Wha! Whoosh! In the next instant, he moved at an extremely fast speed. Wherever he passed, he left behind a series of afterimages. At the same time, evil runes appeared in the air and filled the air. They were ferocious and evil. A bounded domain. Nyetion's eyes suddenly focused and his expression changed. The Holy Son of Evil did not attack him directly. Instead, he created a huge bounded domain in the air and enveloped him instantly. In the next moment, Nyetion sensed that a terrifying power had appeared around him. Like a giant invisible hand, it tried to bind him to death. Damn it! The sudden danger made him growl. Then, the sky sword slashed across the air. The sword's shadow was like a dragon, forcefully breaking through the bounded domain power. Ha 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 ha! At that moment, the Holy Son of Evil's evil laughter came from within the bounded domain. He shouted fiercely, "So you're the master of the sky. The sword in your hand is the sky sword. No wonder you can still fight back in the death god enchantment." Nyetion's face was gloomy. He ignored the Holy Son of Evil and let out a low growl. Then, he slashed at the edge of the bounded domain. However, when his sword's shadow landed, it was directly absorbed by the death god enchantment. It did not cause any damage to the death god enchantment. Master of the sky, don't waste your energy. The eye of the death god enchantment is the death god scythe in my hand. Unless you can destroy the death god scythe, you won't be able to break the death god enchantment. The Holy Son of Evil laughed maniacally. Obediently accept your death today. Nyetion stabilized himself. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and his expression was extremely unsightly. So the eye of the death god enchantment was actually the death god scythe. This was bad. With his current strength, it was impossible for him to forcefully break the death god enchantment. Ha ha ha! Prepare to receive the baptism of the death god. And at this moment, the Holy Son of Evil laughed maniacally. In the air, the death god's scythe suddenly slashed across, and a black light appeared. The sinister aura it exuded was extremely terrifying. It almost tore the void apart as it slammed towards Nyetion. Nyetion's reaction was extremely fast. Astral soul wings appeared on his back as he rapidly retreated. At the same time, he slashed out with the sky sword. But in the next instant a shocking scene occurred. Pooh! The black light was like a sharp blade, forcefully slicing apart Nyetion's sword shadows. After that, it continued on its way towards Nyetion. Before Nyetion could even react, the sharp blade actually pierced through his chest. A bloody hole appeared on his chest. Instantly, blood gushed out, dyeing half of his body red. His body retreated a few thousand meters before he managed to stabilize himself. But in an instant, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper devoid of blood. Ordinary wounds, even if they pierced through his body, wouldn't cause him any fatal injuries. But the wounds caused by the Death God Scythe contained the Death God Chi nurtured by the Holy Son of Evil. Its devouring ability was extremely strong, and it was enough to corrode a cultivator's body in an instant. Nie Tion's martial physique was extremely strong. In addition to the support of the astral energy and the heavenly Tao shackles, he could barely resist the Death God Chi. However, the wound on his chest couldn't heal quickly. Blood flowed unceasingly, consuming a huge amount of his energy. This caused his combat strength to instantly drop by several levels. Ha ha ha, you actually survived a direct hit from the Death God Scythe. As expected of the Lord of the Sky. The all-evil saint stood coldly, his sinister eyes staring at Nie Tion. He laughed maniacally. Rumor has it that the heaven and earth sword heart gathers the righteousness of heaven and earth. It is the nemesis of the Holy Son of Evil. But now, it seems that you, the Lord of the Sky, are more like a joke. An insolent aura surged in the void. The all-evil saint's face was filled with fanaticism, as if he couldn't wait any longer. This was the first time he wanted to taste a man's blood and heart so badly. At this time, the crowd outside the barrier was stunned by the scene inside. They had no time to react. How did the son of all evil, who had been crushed by Nie Tion earlier, suddenly turn the tables on Nie Tion? Nie Tion. Rui Qianyu looked at Nie Tion. Her beautiful eyes flickered, but there was nothing she could do at this time. All she could do was watch. Even if she had the Saint Rune rainbow pupils, she was still too weak in front of an expert like the all-evil saint. Lord of the Sky, it's time to stop. Immediately, the all-evil saint's ferocious and ruthless voice sounded in the Death God boundary. Then, the Death God scythe in his hand slashed through the air. An even more terrifying saber light appeared and charged at Nie Tion. Chapter 3775. Boundary of the God of Death. Boom. Within the boundary of the God of Death, a terrifying black light swept across the sky like a black dragon. It carried the aura of the God of Death and pressed down on Nie Tion. This attack was several times stronger than the previous one. If Nie Tion was hit head-on, he would die without a doubt. Damn it! Nie Tion looked at the bloody hole in his chest. His face was pale and unsightly. He growled and the sword in the sky trembled in his hand. Suddenly, a clear sound of the sword rang out. Sword runes appeared around his body and instantly formed a sword formation. The sword formation in the sky. Bang! In the next moment, the black light fell on the sword formation in the sky. The void shook, but it couldn't break through the defense of the sword formation. The black light turned into runes and dissipated. In the distance, Saint Evil's eyes trembled and he was shocked. He actually blocked it. Interesting. Saint Evil smiled coldly. Then, he discovered something. His eyes were cold and he said, "So it's the sword formation in the sky. No wonder it can be activated in the boundary of the God of Death." The boundary of the God of Death suppressed all kinds of power. If it was an ordinary formation or seal, it couldn't be activated. However, the sword formation in the sky was born from the Sky Sword, and the Sky Sword was the source of the Heart of the Sky. The Heart of the Sky Heart was the natural nemesis of all evil hearts. Therefore, the sword formation in the sky could suppress the scythe of the God of Death. However, Nie Tion's Sky Sword didn't break the seal of heaven and earth, while Saint's scythe of the God of Death did. Therefore, on the surface, it seemed that the scythe of the God of Death was suppressing the sword in the sky. If the sword in the Sky Sword also broke the seal of heaven and earth, the scythe of the God of Death would definitely not be able to resist the sword in the sky. You're right. The sword heart of heaven and earth is indeed the nemesis of all evil hearts. Nie Tion steadied himself and smiled cold. He could already feel that the aura of the Sky Sword was extremely effective against the Grim Reaper side. Otherwise, his Sky Sword formation would not have been able to block the Grim Reaper side's attack. More importantly, he was in the Sky Sword formation, and the bloody hole on his chest was healing at an accelerated rate. Fortunately, the Sword Heart of Heaven and Earth is the bane of the all-evil heart. Otherwise, you would have died long ago. Bodhiseed's lips twitched as he stared at Nye Tian, sneering inwardly. If the martial artist fighting against the all-evil Saint Sun was another Heart of Heaven and Earth martial artist, they would not be able to last until now. After all, the Holy Son of all evil's death scythe had unsealed a Heaven and Earth seal. It was not something that other Heart of Heaven and Earth martial artists could resist. If it had been the Bodhiseed's Bodhi Pearl, not only would it not have been able to retaliate, it might even have been shattered by the Grim Reaper's scythe. The Underworld Emperor, Lian Jiufeng, and the others also saw that the Sword Heart of Heaven and Earth was the bane of the all-evil heart. They were extremely shocked. On the other hand, Devil's Knight had a cold and expressionless face. No one knew what he was thinking. Everyone's expression was extremely shocked. The situation of the battle had changed again and again, catching them off guard. Humph! Within the barrier, the all-evil Saint Sun sneered and said, "So what if the Sword Heart of Heaven and Earth is the bane of the all-evil heart? Your Sky Sword has not unsealed the Heaven and Earth seal at all. How are you going to fight against my Grim Reaper scythe?" The all-evil Saint Sun looked savage on the surface, but he was extremely shocked and even a little frightened. He could not understand how Nye Tian, who had not even unsealed the Heaven and Earth seal, could activate the Sky Sword formation. This was too strange. However, the all-evil Saint Sun did not think too much about it. In his eyes, Nye Tian was already a corpse. When Nye Tian heard the all-evil Saint Sun mention the Heaven and Earth seal, he could not help but be stunned. He did not know what the Heaven and Earth seal was. However, he could clearly feel that the all-evil Saint Sun's Grim Reaper scythe was indeed very terrifying. It was not something that his Sky Sword could compare to. It was as if the all-evil Saint Sun was using a 9th-grade sacred artifact, while he was using a 1st-grade sacred artifact. It was not even a sacred artifact. The gap between the two was unimaginable. "One more slash and I'll take your life." At this moment the all-evil Saint Sun roared. Instantly, the Grim Reaper scythe slashed across the void. A boundless blade intent of the Grim Reaper was released and surged over like rolling dark clouds. Roar! In the next moment, a deep roar echoed out from the void, and the enormous blade intent condensed into a giant beast. Its raging aura spread out and pressed down on Nye Tian. Nye Tian frowned and his expression changed. At this moment, he felt that the violent strangling power was too terrifying. It was not something that the sword formation in the sky could resist. Sword sealing forbidden formation, Sword Dragon devours the world. In an instant, Nye Tian released all the sword intent in his body and activated another sword formation in the sword formation in the sky. He used the power of the dual sword formation to fight against the all-evil Saint Sun. Boom! In the next moment, endless sword intent gathered and a violent sword dragon appeared. Its whole body was surging with a terrifying power. It actually had a dark aura which was very strange. Nye Tian poured the Great Calamity sword intent into the sword dragon, hoping to use this power to resist the giant beast of the Grim Reaper. When he released the sword formation in the sky, he already felt that the Great Calamity sword intent seemed to have an extraordinary stimulating effect on the sword formation in the sky. At this moment of life and death, he could only fight it head-on. Bang! In the Grim Reaper barrier, the giant beast of the Grim Reaper and the giant sword dragon collided, causing a huge explosion in the void. Suddenly, a terrifying power was released. Wild waves surged like thousands of demons dancing wildly, blasting everything in their path. In an instant, Nye Tian felt a tremendous force shrouding him. Before he could react, the sword formation in the sky and the sword sealing forbidden formation collapsed at the same time. His figure was sent flying like a kite with a broken string. On the other side, the all-evil Saint's son was holding the Grim Reaper scythe and penetrated the layers of wild waves without suffering any damage. Bang! Nietion's figure directly hit the edge of the barrier, and only then did he manage to stabilize himself. However, his body was covered with numerous bloody wounds, from which an evil aura was released, making him look bloody and dark. Even with the power of the dual sword formation, he was unable to block the attack just now. The turbid waves dissipated. When the crowd saw the scene in the barrier, their eyes trembled violently, and they were at a loss for words. The all-evil Saint's son was really too terrifying. He had completely crushed Nietion. In the Grim Reaper barrier, even Nietion, who has the heart of the sky, can't defeat the all-evil Saint's son. Bodhiseed's eyes trembled slightly as he thought to himself, the Grim Reaper barrier is not an ordinary barrier. Not only does it strongly suppress the martial body of a cultivator, but it can also continuously absorb power from the outside world. Therefore, the all-evil Saint's son has almost endless power in the Grim Reaper barrier. The Grim Reaper barrier was released by the Grim Reaper scythe and could absorb power from the outside world. Chapter 3776. Chapter 3771. Chapter 3771. Remember the humiliation within the Death God barrier. The Saint of all evil had the upper hand. In addition, his cultivation level was higher than Nietion's, so he was able to crush Nietion. Humph! You, the king of the sky, are just a piece of trash. At that moment, the Saint of all evil took a step forward, and his Grim Reaper aura became even more intense. It was as if the Grim Reaper had walked out of the endless hell. With a sinister expression, he sneered arrogantly. I said that I would make an exception for you. I will suck your blood and eat your heart. Since you can fuse with the heaven and earth sword heart, your martial body should be different from others. My Death God scythe can't wait any longer. Roar! As soon as he finished speaking, the Death God scythe started to shake violently and let out a strange low roar. It was as if there was a bloodthirsty ferocious beast imprisoned in the scythe, and it was starting to get excited. Nietion endured the pain all over his body, and his eyes trembled slightly. As if it was some kind of illusion, he actually saw a faint shadow appear on the Death God scythe's head. It was like a giant snake opening its bloody mouth. The strange scene caused his face to darken. He guessed that the Saint of all evil's passion for sucking blood and eating hearts might have something to do with the Death God scythe. King of the sky, I'm very surprised that you can last until now. The Saint of all evil walked out step by step, his eyes flashing with a cold, murderous intent. He said in a deep voice, but all this is going to end soon. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure instantly moved. He turned into a black light in the void and disappeared directly. Nietion frowned, and his expression became very ugly. He was already seriously injured and had almost no ability to fight back. Even the sword array in the sky could not resist the Saint of all evil, so it would be very difficult for the two astral souls in his body to resist. At that moment there seemed to be only one path in front of him: activate the Godfiend body. However, he was worried that once the Godfiend body was activated, it would activate the power of the Godfiend inverse inscription. But now, under normal circumstances, his martial body was being suppressed by the Divine Demon Inverse Mark. If the Divine Demon Inverse Mark was released, his martial body would not be able to withstand it. It was very likely that he would explode and die. Lord of the Sky, prepare for the baptism of the Grim Reaper. At this moment, the voice of the Saint's son of all evil resounded in the air, following which several black blades of light pierced through the air, aiming to kill Nietion. Pooh! Puff! Nietion didn't have time to react at all. Several wounds appeared on his body that were so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood flowed out like crazy, and his whole body was covered in blood. It was obvious that the Holy Son of all evil didn't want Nyetian to die an easy death. He wanted to slowly torture Nyetian to death. "Damn it!" Nyetian growled in a low voice. His eyes were filled with a cold light. The divine demon inverse mark in his body had started to become restless. With his martial body injured, it was impossible for him to release the divine demon inverse mark even if he didn't want to. This was because his martial body could no longer withstand the pressure of the divine demon inverse mark. "Lord of the Sky, how does the baptism of the Grim Reaper feel?" "Don't worry, this is just the beginning." "Ha ha." The Holy Son of all evil's voice reverberated in the barrier, causing the entire barrier to tremble slightly. His torture of Nyetian had just begun. He wouldn't kill Nyetian so easily. That would be too easy on him. Pooh, pooh, pooh. Following which, several more black lights landed. The flesh on Nyetian's body rolled up, revealing his white bones. It was a terrifying sight. This guy is too cruel. The crowd was shocked by the scene in front of them. Their eyes were trembling. They didn't expect the Holy Son of all evil to be so cruel. He was going to torture Nyetian to death bit by bit. It was hard to imagine that Nyetian could still hold on under such circumstances. They had no idea that Nyetian had been in an even more tragic situation. He had once maintained a strong will to fight even when his martial body's bones were broken. This was Nyetian's unyielding will, Nyetian's fighting spirit. No matter what the situation was, he would never yield. Nyetian. At that moment, a sharp wail was heard from outside the barrier. Following which, a figure flashing with 9 colors appeared and charged towards the Grim Reaper barrier. It was Rui Qianyu. How could she remain indifferent when she saw that Nyetian was about to die? "Little beauty, you'd better stay at the side." The Holy Son of all evil smiled coldly and waved the Grim Reaper scythe in the air. A gust of Grim Reaper chi whizzed out and condensed into 2 black claws, locking Rui Qianyu in place. "Ruoyu." Nyetian's pupils shrank when he saw this. The anger that he had been suppressing exploded. "Lord of the Sky, I will make you remember this humiliation before you die." At that moment, the Holy Son of all evil growled and waved the Grim Reaper scythe. Suddenly, the entire barrier was filled with Grim Reaper chi. It was extremely violent and terrifying. "It's over. That silver-haired swordsman is dead meat." The crowd's eyes trembled in fear. "Nyetian, you finally used the demon god's inverse rune." In the void outside the spirit formation, Mo Ye's eyes were cold and gloomy. The corner of his mouth pulled into a strange arc as he coldly spoke. He knew that Nyetian would use the demon god's inverse rune when he could no longer hold on. "Is that so?" Within the barrier, Nyetian raised his head. His eyes were as dark as the abyss. The demon god's inverse rune appeared all over his body. In an instant, the wounds on his body were forcefully healed. He stood there like a bottomless abyss, constantly releasing a terrifying aura. "Huh!" The Holy Son of all evil couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. He had never expected that Nyetian would have such a dark side. "Die!" However, in the next moment, he growled and swung the Grim Reaper scythe. A terrifying wave of Grim Reaper chi appeared and surged towards Nyetian. Nyetian's eyes were as dark as the night. Under the influence of the demon god's inverse rune, the astral wings on his back turned dark. He moved like a bolt of black lightning, enveloping the Holy Son of all evil. In the next moment, a shocking scene unfolded. Nyetian broke through the wave of Grim Reaper chi. His silhouette was like a giant black bird, instantly descending on the head of the Holy Son of all evil. How is this possible? The sudden scene caused the Holy Son of all evil's eyes to tremble with shock, and he cried out in horror. "Today, the one who should remember this humiliation is you," Nye Tianling said, enunciating each word with a resolute, killing intent. You, the holy son of all evil, felt the killing intent from Nyetian. He was so shocked that he couldn't speak. Chapter 37:77. Even more brutal, the holy son of evil's face turned pale with fright. Before he could react, he felt a terrifying force descending upon him. The oppressive force almost suffocated him. In an instant there was only one word in his mind: run. The wings on his back shook violently and his figure moved in an instant, trying to avoid Nyetian. Bang! However, at that moment, Nyetian threw a punch. A dark fist shadow rolled out like a roaring beast and directly shattered the wings on the holy son of evil's back. Then, Nyetian clenched his fist in the void. A dark force gushed out and turned into runes in the air, instantly shrouding the holy son of evil and imprisoning him. What are you trying to do? The holy son of evil's entire body was shrouded in the dark runes. He could not move at all. Only his face was exposed, but it was extremely terrified. Even his voice was trembling. He never thought that everything would turn around in an instant. Nyetian, who had already lost the ability to fight back, suddenly burst forth with terrifying power in the blink of an eye, making it impossible for him to resist. Until now, he still could not believe that there was such a dark force hidden in Nyetian's body. What do you think? The corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched as he spoke in a cold tone. Then, a black rune appeared. Like a sharp blade, it suddenly fell and directly cut the holy son of evil's face. Ah! The sudden pain caught the holy son of all evil off guard, and he howled in pain. The next moment, the black runes penetrated the wound on his face and entered his face. Like worms, they wriggled on his face. What are you trying to do? The holy son of evil seemed to have sensed something. He endured the pain and growled in a low voice. I said that the one who should remember the humiliation today is you. Nyetian's face was hideous. His entire body seemed to be distorted. He said coldly, What's the use of a person like you? You! The holy son of evil's eyes narrowed as he screamed. Hua! However, in the next moment, an extremely bloody scene occurred. A tearing sound rang out, and the saint's son all evil felt that the scene before him was filled with blood. His face was actually forcefully torn off by Nyetian. In an instant, the air was filled with a pungent stench. At the same time, an evil aura surged. The myriad evil saint's son's blood was different from the blood of ordinary martial artists. It was smelly and evil. Perhaps this was because he had been absorbing other people's blood chi for a long time. Outside the barrier, the crowd was completely stunned by the scene in front of them. Everyone's expression was filled with astonishment. Their gazes were all focused on Nyetian, unable to conceal the fear in their hearts. Who would have thought that Nyetian would not kill the holy son of all evil, and instead use such a cruel method to humiliate him? What was even more unexpected was that the seemingly ordinary Nyetian actually had such a dark and bloody side. It seemed that Nyetian was even more brutal than the saint's son of 10,000 evil. Your Highness! At that moment, the dozen or so secret guards in the air finally reacted. They exclaimed in unison and appeared at the same time. The dozen or so black-robed figures with mountainous and ocean-like auras stood in the air, shaking the heavens and the earth. However, at this moment, their expressions were not calm in the slightest. Instead, they were extremely nervous. They had never thought that the myriad evil saint's son would be defeated by Nyetian. Step back! Nyetian had a stern look on his face as he spoke gloomily. The celestial demon inscriptions on his body were extremely violent, making him look like a demon that had just walked out of an endless abyss. The dozen or so secret guards of the 10,000 evil sect were shocked and couldn't help but step back. They did not dare to take the myriad evil saint's son's life lightly. Perhaps some of them were good at hiding, but the myriad evil saint's son was currently in the hands of Nyetian. They could not afford to let anything happen to him. At this moment, the holy son of all evil seemed to have calmed down, and even threatened Nyetian, Lord of the clear heaven, you can't kill me. I'm the holy son of the heaven of evil. If you dare to kill me, the heaven of evil will never let you off. The 10,000 evil sect? Nye Tianling chuckled as his eyes flickered. He seemed to have heard this name before. However, he could not recall where he had heard it. The activation of the celestial demon inscriptions had greatly affected his consciousness. It was not easy for him to remain clear-headed. The 10,000 evil sect is a force from a high-level sacred realm. You can't afford to offend them, the myriad evil saint's son said in a deep voice. He thought that Nye Tian was afraid. Is that so? Nye Tianling chuckled. Then, his eyes focused and the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. Following that, an even more bloody scene took place. Waves of black runes appeared and shrouded the myriad evil saint's son like tentacles, leaving bloody wounds on his body. Instantly, the stench in the air became even stronger. What is this guy trying to do? Everyone's expression changed in an instant. They were so shocked that they did not even notice the stench in the air. Their eyes were fixed on Nye Tian's body, and they were extremely shocked. No one knew what Nye Tian was going to do next. Don't you like to suck people's blood? Then can you suck your own blood? The corners of Nye Tian's mouth twitched as he smiled coldly. His eyes were extremely gloomy. Master of the sky, is this how you humiliate me? The myriad evil saint's son endured the pain and laughed maniacally. Do you dare to kill me? What do you think? Nye Tian's face was extremely gloomy as he spoke coldly. Following that, 2 black runes surged and landed on the myriad evil saint's son's chest like 2 restless poisonous snakes. You! The myriad evil saint's son's eyes narrowed as he suddenly sensed something. His expression changed, and he cried out in fear, unable to speak. You like to eat other people's hearts. Let me see what your heart looks like. The corners of Nye Tian's lips curled up into a sinister smile. His voice was so cold that it seemed like it could freeze space. This! Everyone's eyes trembled, and they all cried out in shock. They were instantly speechless. It turned out that Nye Tian wanted to dig out the myriad evil saint's son's heart. Don't hurt his highness. The myriad evil saint's son was completely scared out of his wits. A dark guard stood up and shouted, The myriad evil saint will agree to any condition you have. Any condition? Nye Tianling laughed and said, If I say that I want all those who died in his hands to come back to life, can the myriad evil saint's son do it? The dark guard was stunned and speechless when he heard Nye Tian's words. If I don't kill him today, more people will die in his hands in the future. Nye Tianling smiled coldly. Do you think I will let him go? Chapter 3778. Evil Heart, No. Seeing Nye Tian's brazen attack, the dozen or so dark guards screamed at the same time. They were so scared that their faces instantly turned pale. Their responsibility was to protect the holy son of all evil. If the latter died, they would all be buried with him. They hadn't expected that Nye Tian would really dare to kill the holy son of all evil in front of them. But at this moment, Nye Tian had already made up his mind to kill. He would not show any mercy. However, just as the 2 dark runes were about to land, Nye Tian suddenly felt a strange force. His expression changed and he was stunned. Nye Tian, this guy can't die. Then, a deep voice sounded, At least not now. It's you, Devil's Knight. When Nye Tian heard this voice, he suddenly turned around and saw a dark figure. It was Devil's Knight. Nye Tian, there's no point in killing him. You'll only anger the Shadow Guards. Devil's Knight said cold and gloomy. What if I insist on killing him? Nye Tian stared at Devil's Knight coldly with a gaze as sharp as a knife. With me here, you won't be able to kill him. Devil's Knight's lips curled into a cold and arrogant smile. At this moment, Nye Tian suddenly felt a violent energy appear within his body. It was like a wild beast that was about to tear his body apart. It's the inverse divine demon rune. Nie Tian's expression changed and he cried out in horror. The power that Devil's Night had left in his body hadn't disappeared. It had just been temporarily integrated with the inverse demon mark. But now, Devil's Night could actually control that power. Save me. Seeing Devil's Night's sudden appearance, the Holy Son of all Evil's eyes burned with passion and trembled as he spoke with a trembling voice. Devil's Night ignored him. Instead, he looked at Nie Tian and said, "This guy deserves to die, but if you kill him now, you'll only bring trouble to yourself." Really? Nie Tian's eyes were incomparably dark as he spoke in a cold tone. His entire face was savage and looked extremely terrifying. Nie Tian, you won't be able to withstand the power of the divine demon inscription. Don't be rash, Devil's Night said gloomily when he sensed that Nie Tian's expression wasn't right. If I, Nie Tian, want to kill someone, I must kill him. Nie Tianling sneered and let out a fierce roar. Immediately, he unleashed all of his strength, and the two black talismans pierced into the Holy Son of all Evil's chest like daggers. Pooh! The next moment, a bloody scene appeared before everyone's eyes. 2 pillars of blood spurted out from the Holy Son of all Evil's chest. The next scene was even more bloody. The 2 talismans, like iron claws, forcibly dug out the Holy Son of all Evil's heart. Suddenly, the surrounding space was filled with an abnormal stench, and the entire world seemed to be covered in a layer of scarlet red. The color of blood was dim. The moment his heart was dug out, the Holy Son of all Evil was still conscious. He saw the scarlet beating heart with his own eyes and looked at Nie Tian. He wanted to say something, but the breath of life in his eyes instantly dissipated. His Highness the Holy Son of all Evil Heavens, the possessor of the evil heart, had died. A person who liked to suck the blood of others and eat their hearts had been tortured to death by 1,000 cuts and then dug out his heart. Such an ending made people sigh. The bloody and brutal scene stunned everyone present. They could not react for a long time. Their expressions were completely dull as they stared at Nie Tian in horror. They did not know how to express the shock in their hearts. Nie Tian had actually tortured and killed the Holy Son of all Evil while surrounded by more than a dozen powerhouses of the Holy Son of all Evil. This action was even more shocking than the bloody scene. Was Nie Tian really not afraid of death? Devil's Night was instantly stunned. He only reacted after a few seconds and roared like a wild beast, "Nie Tian, are you crazy?" It was as if he was very unwilling to see Nie Tian kill the Holy Son of all Evil. "Your Highness!" Almost at the same time, more than a dozen dark guards let out strange cries. Their auras surged violently like huge waves in the ocean, surging and devouring the world. The scene that had just happened felt somewhat surreal. The dignified Holy Son of all Evil had died just like that. It was really unbelievable. However, at this moment, Nie Tian didn't pay any attention to the others. Instead, he blurred into action and arrived by the Son of all Evil's side in the blink of an eye. Then, he reached out his hand and unleashed an invisible gravitational force that forcibly pulled a vortex of darkness from the Son of all Evil's corpse. The heart of all evil. Devil's Night's eyes trembled as he shouted in horror. The dark vortex in Nie Tian's hand was one of the 9 cores of heaven and earth, the heart of all evil. "It seems that what you really care about is the heart of all evil," Nie Tian said coldly as he looked at the heart of all evil in his hand. The corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile. "Nie Tian, hand over the heart of all evil to me. I will help you suppress the celestial demon inscription. How about it?" Devil's Night's eyes were fixed on the heart of all evil. He appeared to be extremely fanatical as he spoke cautiously. "What if I don't hand it over?" Nie Tian asked cold with a strange smile. "With your strength, you won't be able to suppress the celestial demon inscription." Devil's Night's eyes trembled as he said cold. "That may not be true." Nie Tianling smiled. Immediately, A sword essence gushed out from his palm and imprisoned the heart of all evil. He was about to put it into the 9 superbs. Boom! However, at this moment, the heart of all evil trembled strangely. Immediately, an extremely and evil force was released. It actually broke free from the imprisonment of Nietion's sword essence. Huh! The sudden change made Nietion's expression change, and he could not help but cry out in surprise. Hee. At this moment, a sinister laughter came from the heart of all evil. Then, a mass of and evil chi appeared and condensed into a horrible ghost face in the air. This. Nietion frowned. He did not expect that the heart of all evil would undergo such a strange change. Get the heart of all evil back. Immediately, more than a dozen dark guards reacted. One of them seemed to be the commander. He shouted in a low voice and instantly moved towards the heart of all evil. Compared to the death of the Holy Son, what was more important was that the heart of all evil could not be lost. If the Holy Son died and the heart of all evil was lost, then even if these dark guards had 1,000 lives, they would not be able to survive. Oh no! Seeing this, Nietion's expression changed, and he felt that something was wrong. These dark guards were all experts at the peak of the tribulation Holy King level. Any one of them could kill him in an instant. Now that the heart of all evil was out of his control, it was impossible to get it back. Get it! At the same time, the crowd was boiling. Someone shouted angrily. Suddenly, all the figures moved together. In front of them was the heart of all evil, one of the 9 hearts of heaven and earth. How could they resist the temptation? Chapter 3779. Chapter 3774. Divine Soul Boom. 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 In an instant, dozens of terrifying auras rose from the void and rushed into the sky. There were dozens of experts present, and many of them were peak heaven tribulation divine kings. The activation of the 5 calamities not only alarmed the experts of the 5 underworld holy domains, but also the experts of the nearby holy domains. Most of these people did not know what kind of power the core of heaven and earth was, but some of them had heard of it and knew that it was a very terrifying power. Even though there were dozens of dark guards from the evil sky, these experts were willing to take the risk and snatch the evil heart. Boom, boom, boom. In the void, waves of violent auras collided with each other like mountains colliding. There was a dull explosion, and the world trembled. Nietion frowned and instantly retreated. He could not resist a battle of this level, and could only dodge to the side. Devil's Knight's face was gloomy and he also retreated to the side. No matter how fierce he was, it was impossible for him to fight with a peak heaven sage. The evil heart of heaven and earth is mine. All of you get out of the way, the evil heart is mine. I will fight whoever dares to have the evil heart of heaven and earth. In an instant, the whole place was in chaos. The experts no longer had any scruples, and they all revealed ferocious expressions as they fought for the evil heart of heaven and earth. Boom, boom, boom. In the sky, the terrifying power tumbled endlessly, and it was unusually violent. Waves of power were like wild snakes, stirring up the world and devouring everything. Nietion frowned, and his eyes stared at the evil heart of heaven and earth. He saw that in the dark vortex formed by the evil heart of heaven, there was a pair of eyes hidden. It was extremely evil and spied on everything. There is a powerful godly soul in the evil heart. Nietion's expression suddenly changed, and he exclaimed in his heart. He could not believe that he actually sensed a terrifying godly soul in the evil heart of heaven and earth. Could it be that the person is imprisoned in the evil heart? Nietion forced himself to calm down and guessed. At the same time, another pair of eyes was staring at the heart of evil. The owner of this pair of eyes was none other than Buddhist Lord Bodhi. So, the true Lord of all evil is hiding within the heart of all evil. Interesting. The Bodhi seed's eyes gleamed with light as he laughed coldly in his heart. He also sensed the spirit in the heart of evil, but he didn't seem too surprised. Instead, he was extremely playful, as if everything in front of him was a game. And he was someone outside of this game, or rather, someone who could lead the game. At this moment, the scene was in chaos. Many experts fought with each other, desperately trying to get closer to the heart of evil. However, the heart of evil was erratic, as if it was playing hide and seek with these experts. In Nye Tian's eyes, the truth was that the evil heart was toying with these experts. But these experts didn't notice it at all. Instead, they fought with all their might. Scram! At this moment, a shadow guard from the heart of evil growled and swung his palm angrily. Under the surging power, the shadow of a palm appeared and shot towards a green-robed cultivator. Bang! The cultivator was clearly weaker, so he was killed before he could even react. He turned into a splatter of blood in the air. Then, the shadow guard's eyes trembled and he suddenly moved. Like a bolt of lightning, he charged towards the heart of evil. Boom! However, at this moment the void suddenly trembled, following which, a terrifying force appeared and directly descended towards the shadow guard. Bang! Then, there was a muffled sound, and the shadow guard was sent flying, leaving a trail of blood in the air. It's that guy! Nye Tian immediately sensed a familiar aura with his consciousness when he saw this. His eyes darkened, and he turned around to look at the sky. A familiar face appeared. It was Lai Jiufeng. Lai Jiufeng stood coldly in the sky, his eyes shining with greed. The person who had just killed the shadow guard was the one who had been hiding beside him, Ghost Face. Ghost Face hadn't shown himself until now, but he had attacked once and suppressed the demon sword. Nye Tian guessed that Ghost Face's true strength was about the same as the Rakshasa guardian deity. Ghost Face's attack was clearly aimed at the heart of evil. Boom! At this moment, a sinister ghost claw appeared in the sky and enveloped the heart of evil. Kakik! The heart of evil seemed to feel a great threat in an instant. It let out a series of strange cackles, then flickered in the sky and disappeared. Damn it! The ghost claw missed, but Ghost Face's growl resounded through the air. Nye Tian's eyebrows furrowed as his expression flickered. He suddenly sensed that an invisible force was madly pouncing towards him. Nye Tian, watch out! At this moment, the little fat cat seemed to have sensed something and cried out in alarm. But it was too late. Nye Tian suddenly felt a black light appear. Before he could react, the black light had sunk into his body. The heart of evil. Nye Tian's expression froze, but he immediately reacted and cried out. The black light just now was clearly the heart of evil. It had sunk into his body. This. Nye Tian froze in place. He wanted to say something, but he couldn't. He hadn't thought that the heart of evil would suddenly enter his body. Immediately afterwards, everyone realized what was going on and exclaimed in unison. Then, countless cold, murderous gazes were fixed on Nye Tian like countless sharp blades. The astonishment and greed in their eyes made it seem as if they wanted to devour him. Who would have thought that the heart of evil would suddenly rush towards Nye Tian? In everyone's eyes, the heart of evil had merged with Nye Tian. Nye Tian felt the oppressive aura rushing towards him. His expression suddenly changed, and he couldn't explain himself. Most of these experts were peak Sage King expert. If they attacked him, he wouldn't be able to fight back. However, at this moment, Nye Tian felt that the pressure from the inverse divine demon inscription in his body had weakened significantly. It seemed that the heart of evil had helped him suppress the violent inverse divine demon inscription. The heart of evil is with him. Let's kill him. Immediately afterwards, someone let out a thunderous roar and unleashed a wild aura as he dashed towards Nye Tian like a wild beast. Nye Tian's pupils shrank, and he instinctively wanted to open his wings of star soul. However, he felt that the surrounding space was locked by an invisible force. Chapter 3780. The arrival of experts. Nye Tian was shocked to realize that the surrounding time and space had been sealed. His expression changed and beads of sweat the size of beans appeared on his forehead. At this moment, most of the people who were charging towards him were peak Saint King level experts. Any one of them could easily kill him with a single palm strike. "Little boy, don't be afraid. Your savior is here." At this moment, a deep and sinister voice suddenly sounded, causing Nye Tian to be stunned and his entire body to freeze. This voice was clearly the voice that the evil heart of 10,000 evils had previously made. Boom! 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 Just as Nye Tian was in a state of shock, countless frenzied attacks fell, stirring up the winds and clouds in the sky as they rained down on him. These frightening attacks had not yet landed, but the violent momentum was already somewhat unbearable for Nye Tian. Hua! At the moment of life and death, a beam of light suddenly appeared high up in the sky. It fell down like a waterfall and instantly enveloped Nye Tian like a shield. Huh! The sudden change made Nye Tian's expression change, and he could not help but cry out in surprise. Bang, bang, bang! In the next moment, countless attacks fell and landed on the light shield. However, they were unable to break through the defense of the shield, and all of them collapsed. This power, it's so strong. Nye Tian's eyes trembled and his heart was filled with shock. This beam of light did not seem to be anything special, but it was able to block the attacks of so many experts. It was really too unbelievable. The person who attacked was definitely a martial artist who was far more powerful than a peak Saint King. Who is it? When everyone saw that their attacks had been blocked, they could not help but become sluggish. They paused in the void for a moment and cried out in unison. At this moment, they could already feel that the void was filled with an indescribable pressure. It was extremely huge, and when they carefully sensed it, it actually made them feel despair. What's going on? The surrounding crowd was also shocked by this strange scene and did not know what was happening. Scram! At this very moment, an extremely deep, furious roar rang out. Afterwards, a terrifying power appeared and surged out in an instant. It was like thousands of wild waves, and the several dozen saint rulers in the surroundings could not withstand it at all. They were all blown away. Some of the weaker saint rulers even vomited blood mid-air. Nye Tian's expression changed upon seeing this. The shock in his heart was indescribable. This person's casual attack had actually sent several dozen saint rulers flying, and there were even peak saint rulers among them. This person's strength was unimaginable. The Rakshasa Vajra by the Bodhi seed side was most likely a powerhouse at the level of the Tianju's sacred emperor. The person who had attacked was even stronger than the Rakshasa Vajra. However, the 5 underworld holy world was only a mid-grade holy world. It should not have produced such a powerful cultivator. The group of experts was sent flying tens of thousands of meters away. When they finally stabilized themselves, they looked at Nye Tian in horror, fear clearly written on their faces. Even now, they still didn't know where the person who attacked them was. "This brat is under my protection. Whoever dares to approach him will die." At this moment, an extremely powerful voice resounded in the void. It was like a clap of thunder, resounding in everyone's ears and causing their souls to tremble. When the last word "die" was spoken, the eyes of the experts could not help but tremble. They instinctively retreated and looked at Nye Tian with even more fear. Even a fool could tell that the expert in the void had come to protect Nye Tian. There's actually someone like this by Nye Tian's side. The Bodhi seed looked at Nye Tian from afar. His eyes were trembling slightly, and he seemed extremely cold. At this moment, Nye Tian was also very surprised. He also did not know who the person who had suddenly appeared was. Could it be that he was the person who helped me just now? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed as he guessed. Previously, he had been imprisoned by a secret guard. It was because someone had secretly attacked the secret guard that he had been able to break free. "Brat, come with me." At this moment, a deep voice resounded in the void once more. Then, a vague figure appeared. It seemed to be an illusion and could not be seen clearly. Without hesitation, Nye Tian moved to Rui Qianyu's side. He nodded slightly and said, "Rui Qianyu, let's leave this place first." Rui Qianyu was much calmer now. After nodding, she left with Nye Tian. The people present could only watch as Nye Tian left with the heart of evil. No one dared to stop him. The cultivator's strength was too terrifying. Even the dozen or so experts from the heaven of evil did not dare to act recklessly. Lian Jiufeng, the Bodhi seed, and the others' eyes were cold and unresigned. However, no matter how unwilling they were, they did not dare to act. In the blink of an eye, Nye Tian and Rui Qianyu's figures completely disappeared, leaving the crowd sighing. Who would have thought that the commotion would end in such a manner? Beside Devil's Night, Lan Zhuiying had a strange expression on her face. The holy son of evil's death had inexplicably moved her heart. It was as if someone had taken something away from her. At this moment, she could not remember her original identity at all. Her memories had been completely altered by Devil's Night. The people of the heaven of evil did not attack the other cultivators. Instead, they hurriedly left with the holy son of evil's corpse. The holy son of evil had been tortured to death, and the heart of evil had been stolen. They had to immediately return to the heaven of evil and report what had happened here to their superiors. Nye Tian, the power of the 5 tribulations is about to appear. You will come back, right? The Bodhi seed's lips curled into a smile as he looked in the direction where Nye Tian had disappeared. The power of the 5 tribulations was extremely important to the heart of the world. Nye Tian would definitely not give up on it. On the other side, the underworld emperor's face was gloomy. However, he knew that Nye Tian would definitely return, because Sher was still in his hands. Following this, everyone calmed down and waited quietly for the power of the 5 tribulations to appear. At the same time, high up in the sky, Nye Tian and Rui Qianyu were flying at top speed. They wanted to catch up to the figure in front of them, but they discovered that no matter how fast they were, the figure always maintained a fixed distance from them. Nye Tian was anxious to know who had saved him, but it was obvious that the other party was unwilling to reveal themselves. "Little kid, I'm leaving. I've temporarily helped you suppress the power in your body. However, that power is too violent. Even I can only suppress it for a few days. If you can't break through in a few days, you can only wait for death." At that moment, a grim voice echoed out in Nye Tian's mind, causing him to go blank, and his face filled with astonishment. This voice had come from the heart of evil. "Who are you?" Nye Tian became cold as he asked in a deep voice. "It's best that you don't know my identity for now. However, we will meet again very soon. When that time comes, you will definitely be very surprised." The voice rang out again. Following this, Nye Tian felt a wave of power being stripped from his body and disappearing in an instant. Nye Tian frowned, unable to react for a long time. The heart of evil had actually disappeared on its own after fusing with him for a short period of time. This was too strange. "We're here." While Nye Tian was still in a state of shock, the figure in front of him suddenly stopped. The figure's figure gradually became clear, and its original appearance was revealed. Chapter 3781. Chapter 3776. Old ancestor Wu Ming Tian stared at the figure in front of him and was momentarily stunned, unable to speak for a long time. The figure suddenly turned around and asked Nye Tian with a faint smile, "Brat, does my appearance scare you?" At this moment, his voice was very calm and didn't have the forceful pressure from before. Instead, he sounded like an old grandpa next door. However, this person's appearance was very strange. No matter how amiable he was, he could still scare people quite a bit. In terms of body shape, this was a human. However, his height was only the height of a 12-year-old child, and his body was very fat. It was even more exaggerated than Jean de Bao. What was even more strange was that his face was 50% human and 50% beast. To be more precise, It looked like a dragon. That's right, it looked like a dragon. His face was covered in scales, and there were 2 black horns on his forehead. They were in the shape of a dragon, and looked very domineering. His palms were also covered in scales. They were very dense and flickered with a black luster. His entire body should also be covered in scales. Just now, Nye Tian had been struck dumb by the old man's appearance. "Senior, you are." Nye Tian was stunned for a few seconds before he finally reacted. He opened his mouth but didn't know how to ask. "Brat, you want to ask if this old ancestor is a human, right?" The strange old man wasn't angry. He smiled faintly and said, "Although this old ancestor's appearance is a little strange, I am indeed a human cultivator. It's just that this old ancestor belongs to a different race from ordinary humans." Nye Tian nodded and finally calmed down. He bowed slightly to the old man and said sincerely, "Thank you for saving my life, Senior. May I know how to address you?" "My name is Old Ancestor Wu Ming." Old Ancestor Wu Ming smiled faintly. Then, his eyes looked around and sized up Nye Tian. He chuckled and said, "Brat, this old ancestor saved you, but you can't just say a word of thanks." Nye Tian furrowed his brows, then he smiled and said, "Senior has saved my life. If there is anything you need my help with, please don't hesitate to ask." The name Wuming Ancestor surprised Nye Tian quite a bit, because he was currently in the Wuming sacred world. From the looks of it, this old ancestor Wu Ming had an extraordinary identity. Furthermore, Nye Tian was very curious. Just which race did Patriarch Wu Ming belong to? Why did he have such a strange appearance? "Kid, the reason why I saved you is because someone told me that you have the ability to revive the dead." Ancestor Wu Ming's expression turned a little strange. He stared at Nye Tian and said, "Furthermore, I made a promise to that person. As long as you can save the person I want to save, I can do 3 things for you." "Resurrect the dead? 3 things?" Nye Tian could not help but frown when he heard old ancestor Wu Ming's words. It seemed like old ancestor Wu Ming coming to save him was arranged by someone in the dark. But old ancestor Wu Ming asking him to save the dead was too ridiculous. Resurrecting the dead only existed in legends. How could it exist in reality? Even those experts who had been reborn mostly had an immortal soul and borrowed a body to be reborn. Resurrection in the truest sense of the word was simply impossible. Furthermore, old ancestor Wu Ming said that he could do 3 things for Nye Tian. That was even stranger. It seemed like the mastermind had already made some sort of agreement with old ancestor Wu Ming. Old ancestor Wu Ming was only looking for Nye Tian to complete the agreement. "Senior Wu Ming, did you just arrive when you saved me?" Nye Tian became cold and asked with a frown. "Of course." Old ancestor Wu Ming also frowned and said, "If I had been here earlier, how could I have let you be so heavily injured?" "I see." Nye Tian's lips twitched as he nodded with a smile. It looked like old ancestor Wu Ming wasn't the one secretly helping him. That person had been there all along, but he had not made a move. Instead, he had been waiting for old ancestor Wu Ming to arrive. The person in the dark probably couldn't show himself for some reason. That person was really patient. Wasn't he afraid that Nye Tian would die at the hands of the Holy Son of 10,000 evil or someone else? "Brat, don't tell me you don't have the ability to resurrect the dead?" Old ancestor Wu Ming's face sank when he saw Nye Tian hesitating. "Senior Wu Ming, truth be told, I do not know how to resurrect the dead. However, since that person said that I have such a method, there might be a reason. How about you let me see who you want to resurrect first?" Nye Tian said calmly with a faint smile. Since someone had arranged everything in secret, Xiao Chun felt much more at ease. He guessed that the person who made an agreement with old ancestor Wu Ming was a star venerate or a star emissary. It might even be someone from the Heavenly Martial Association. Of course, it could also be someone from the Fengtian Fate sect. Sure. Old ancestor Wu Ming faintly smiled. His figure flashed as he flew towards a valley below. Nie Tian turned around, looked at Raindrop and Thousand Leaves, and followed after them. The three of them descended and entered the valley. Just as Nie Tian stepped into the valley, he sensed an extremely foul aura. His expression changed, and he couldn't help frowning. What aura is this? Rui Qianyu also sensed the foul aura and frowned. Little girl, wait here. Just let your man come in alone. Just then, old ancestor Wu Ming turned around and said to Raindrop Qianye, Little girl, wait here. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and glanced at Rui Qianyu. The latter nodded and entered the nine extremities. Brat, I didn't expect you to have a small world with you. It seems like your identity is extraordinary. Old ancestor Wu Ming smiled. He could tell that the nine extremities was an inner world. Nie Tian nodded with a smile and didn't say anything else. Then, under old ancestor Wu Ming's lead, Nie Tian entered the depths of the valley. He couldn't help but stop at the deepest part of the valley. He saw that in the deepest part of the valley was a cave that flickered with a faint black light. The entire valley's fiendish aura was coming from that cave. Brat, the person you want to revive is in the cave. Old ancestor Wu Ming turned to look at Nie Tian and said in a deep voice. This aura. Nie Tian frowned and didn't know what to say. The fiendish stench in the cave made him a little uncomfortable. He can't leave the cave. Let's go in, said old ancestor Wu Ming. His calm tone contained an inviolable tyranny. Nie Tian frowned and could only bite the bullet and follow. Chapter 3782. Body of Nether Dragon, Fat, what did you find? When Nie Tian heard Fat Cat scream, his eyes narrowed and his expression changed slightly. He had rarely seen the Fat Cat look so panicked. The Fat Cat must have found something incredible. Could it be that this aura is the legendary? At this moment, it wasn't the Fat Cat who responded to Nie Tian, but the Ghost Emperor. The latter paused for a moment. Extreme shock could be seen on its illusory face as it said three words in a deep voice, Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon. Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon? When Nie Tian heard this name, he was stunned. He had never heard of a Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon before. Moreover, this name was a little weird, which made him feel very strange. It's the Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon. Fat Cat exclaimed in shock. Nie Tian frowned again, and the doubts in his heart grew heavier. The Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor acted very seriously. It was obvious that the Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon was no small matter. We're here. Before Nie Tian could ask Fat Cat and Ghost Emperor about the Seven Fiend Abyssal Dragon, old ancestor Wu Ming pointed to a stone door in front and said, The person I want you to save is in the stone room. Nie Tian looked at the stone chamber in front of him, and could not help but frown. His face sank. He could clearly feel a powerful spirit formation sealing the stone room. However, this spirit formation power was still unable to isolate the intense fiendish aura coming from the stone room. It seemed that this foul aura came from the person in the stone room, the person who needed Nie Tian's help. Let's go in. Old ancestor Wu Ming looked at the stone room and let out a long sigh. Then, he formed a strange hand seal. Instantly, the stone door opened. An incomparably dense amount of evil energy poured out and rushed towards Nie Tian, making him shudder uncontrollably. That fiendish aura was simply too terrifying. Nie Tian actually felt that the 9 dragon veins in his body seemed to have been attacked and suddenly became restless. What's going on? Nie Tian frowned. His expression changed and he cried out in his heart. His 9 dragon veins were the fusion of the 9 star dragon veins and the 5 yang dragon veins to form the supreme dragon veins. Why did it seem to feel threatened and become agitated? It's the chi of the netherworld dragon. Your dragon meridian felt threatened and naturally became agitated, said the Fat Cat in a deep voice. Threat? Nie Tian was stunned. He was even more surprised. At this moment, he could already feel that the foul aura contained a vague draconic aura. It was this draconic aura that caused his sovereign dragon meridian to become restless. Even his sovereign dragon meridian began to tremble under the influence of the draconic aura, as if it was being suppressed. His sovereign dragon meridian was actually trembling under the threat of a draconic aura. This was simply too strange. Nie Tian's expression was extremely ugly. He stared at the stone room, but under the influence of the barrier, he couldn't see clearly. He could only vaguely see a blurry figure lying there, not moving at all. At this moment, old ancestor Wu Ming stepped into the stone room. Nie Tian thought for a moment and followed without hesitation. After entering the stone room, Nie Tian finally saw the appearance of the figure clearly. He was completely stunned and only reacted after a long time. The figure was lying on the ground, covered in dragon scales. It didn't look like a human at all, but a young dragon. His body was completely stiff, and he was emitting a strong stench that made people feel nauseous. Nie Tian furrowed his brows and forcefully endured the foul aura. He used his divine sense to sense the figure on the ground, but he couldn't sense any signs of life. It was as if this person was completely stiff and dead. Netherworld Dragon's physique. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out. She seemed extremely surprised and even shocked. Her eyes shone with a scorching light, as if she had found a treasure. Nether Dragon body? Upon hearing this name, Nie Tian couldn't help but be taken aback. It was the seven-fiend abyssal dragon earlier, and now it's the Netherworld Dragon's physique. Just where did this strange fellow come from? Nie Tian, does this fellow on the ground remind you of someone? Fat Cat didn't answer Nie Tian's question. Someone? Nie Tian was stunned and couldn't react for a moment. Yes, a person with a very high status in the domain who possesses a special martial technique. Fat Cat nodded. She looked at the figure on the ground with even more excitement in her eyes. Myriad Domain's guild leader, Jingju. Nie Tian searched his mind and suddenly thought of this name. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he exclaimed in his heart, "Dragon martial technique." Yes. Fat Cat chuckled and nodded. Before coming to the Sage Realm, Nie Tian already knew that the dragon clan he knew was only the Divine Realm Dragon Clan. These Dragon Clan were subspecies of the Sage Realm Dragon Clan in the domain. They couldn't be considered the real Dragon Clan. Nie Tian had seen a dragon corpse that was more than 100,000 meters long in the giant stone array of the Icy Fiend Winged Clan. That was probably the real Sage Realm Dragon Clan. When he was in the domain, Nie Tian had also seen a Sage Realm Dragon Clan martial artist. He was the president of the Myriad Domains Guild, Zhenjuren. According to Fat Cat, Zhenjuren belonged to the startling dragon bloodline of the Sage Realm Dragon Clan. The dragon martial technique that he possessed was actually the power of the startling dragon bloodline. Moreover, Fat Cat had told Nie Tian that the Sage Realm Dragon Clan had two forms, human form and dragon form. The strange figure on the ground looked like Zhenjuren after he transformed into a dragon. However, his body was too small and was no different from a human. He looked more like a young dragon. Old ancestor Wu Ming's appearance was even stranger. He looked like a cross between a human and a dragon. He looked like a member of the Dragon Clan who had failed to transform into a dragon. Fat, are you saying that this fellow in front of us is a member of the Dragon Clan? At this time, Nie Tian was stunned. He finally reacted and exclaimed in shock. Yes. Fat Cat smiled strangely and said, "Not only the fellow on the ground, this fat old man is also a member of the Dragon Clan. Moreover, he is one of the four most powerful ancestral dragon bloodlines in the Dragon Clan, the Dark Dragon Clan." Dark Dragon Clan? Nie Tian's eyes darkened when he heard this name. He was extremely surprised.